Chapter 405. Zhang Yan didn't care about Wang Kuejia, who broke into the formation. Even if the Quanta tribe was powerful and had tens of thousands of people, they couldn't kill their way into the Qinsang school. If they didn't want to live long enough, they could try. He ordered the mirror spirit to summon the Wang sisters and Tian Kuan. After thinking for a while, he also summoned Yuan Yanhui and Wen Ziyuan. Under the protection of the mirror spirit, he sent them to the formation to practice with Wang Kuejia. The Wang sisters and Tian Kuan had never fought with anyone since they started cultivating. Along the way, they didn't lack any magic treasures or cave residences. It could be said that their journey was smooth sailing. Compared to the hardships that Zhang Yan went through when he was cultivating, it was many times better. However, if they didn't practice hard, they wouldn't be successful. Zhang Yan wanted to use this demon cultivator to train them. Yuan Yanhui and Wen Ziyuan were a little different. Like Lu Yenny, they often went out to kill demons and monsters to exchange for magic treasures and elixirs. They were very experienced in fighting. The difference was that Lu Yenny had to do this because her master wasn't in the sect. She could only rely on herself. As for Yuan Yanhui and Wen Ziyuan, their master Zhu Bingguan wanted them to be independent so that they wouldn't be unable to stand in the sect after he reincarnated. Although this elder Zhu was good at manipulating people's minds, he was really good at teaching children. Of course, he didn't obtain this ability out of thin air. Before he took these two disciples, he had a few dozen disciples, and their bones had been buried somewhere long ago. He had expended a great deal of effort in order to teach these two disciples that he was proud of. Hearing Zhang Yan's summons, Wang and Yuan dared not delay for even a moment. They walked out of the cultivation area and entered the main hall with the Wang sisters and Tian Kuan. They crossed the formation door and went to find Wang Kuejia as their opponent. As soon as they entered the formation, Yuan Yanhui saw Wang Kuejia barging around. From his appearance, it was obvious that he was a core formation stage demonic cultivator. Her beautiful eyes lit up and her pretty face was filled with excitement. If it wasn't for the protection of the formation, how could she fight against such a demonic cultivator? She immediately raised her sword and was about to charge forward, but at this moment, she felt her sleeve being pulled by someone. She subconsciously struggled, but she didn't manage to break free. She turned around and saw her senior brother. She couldn't help but anxiously stomp her foot and say, "Senior brother, why are you holding on to little sister?" Wen Ziyuan smiled and said, "Junior sister, you don't have to be impatient. Do you know why the Manor Lord sent us here?" Yuan Yan asked doubtfully, "You're not using this monster to practice?" Wen Ziyuan shook his head slightly and said, "Since we're just practicing, why do we have to go forward together? Isn't that against the Manor Lord's original intention? The Manor Master ordered us to come here with his 3 disciples. He wants us to take care of them from the side." Although Yuan Yanhui had a fiery temper, she was also very smart. After Wen Ziyuan's reminder, she immediately understood that the two of them weren't the main characters today. She couldn't help but feel discouraged. She curled her lips and restrained her sword chi a little. Wen Ziyuan comforted her, "Junior sister, don't be disappointed. With the Manor Lord here, if we can gain his trust, we won't have to worry about not having a chance to fight in the future." Yuan Yanhui snorted and turned her head away, saying, "I don't care." Wen Ziyuan saw that she was rubbing her toes on the ground and occasionally glancing in the direction of the demonic cultivator. How could he not see that she wasn't speaking the truth? He couldn't help but find it funny. But even when he was talking to Yuan Yanhui, his attention was always on the Wang sisters and Tian Kuan. If there was any danger, he would immediately lend a helping hand. Zhang Yan knew the situation inside the formation like the back of his hand. When he saw Wen Ziyuan's action, he knew that Wen Ziyuan understood his intention. He nodded secretly and felt that Wen Ziyuan could be useful. With the protection of the mirror spirit and the help of Yuan and Wen Ziyuan, he didn't need to worry about the safety of the Wang sisters and Tian Kuan at all. So he withdrew his mind and talked to Luo Xiao, listening to her talk about what happened in the demon clan. However, after he heard this, he frowned and said in a deep voice, "Fellow cultivator Luo, are you saying that Quan He not only destroyed those sects, but also used the people he captured from the Donghua continent as rations?" Luo Xiao sighed and nodded, saying that Chuanhe takes pleasure in eating people. When he is in a mood, he will eat hundreds of people at a meal. If something good is good, it must be good. The tribes under his command also have the same behavior. In the world, humans were the most intelligent of all creatures. Those demons who had not yet transformed deeply believed that eating humans could help them improve their cultivation. Whether it was useful or not, as long as there was blood food, they would eat it. But after tasting the taste, even if their cultivation increased in the future, they couldn't get rid of the bad taste of the tongue. They would feel greedy if they didn't eat humans for a day. In the past, there were cultivators from Xianmen who went out to kill these ferocious evildoers. But now, no one paid attention to them and they became even more unscrupulous. Luo Xiao was a relative of the old demon Luo Mengzi and had an extraordinary background. Ever since she transformed, her speech and behavior were no different from that of a human cultivator. She also couldn't stand such beastly behavior. But when she was in the Quanta tribe, her words didn't carry much weight and she couldn't stop them. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered slightly. He said firmly, "Such a vicious and evil demon tribe cannot be left alive. We must take the initiative to destroy it. Taoism friend Luo, I will end the karma between you and this demon tribe." Luo Xiao originally took this disciple over and there would be a time when this matter would be settled. Of course, at that time, maybe Luo Xiao would take action, or maybe her disciple would do it herself. She had never thought of letting someone else do it. However, after hearing Zhang Yan's resolute and decisive words, she stood up and bowed gracefully, saying, "I will listen to Master's decision on this matter." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Taoism friend Luo, you have been busy for a long time. Go and rest first." Luo Xiao bowed again and took her leave. Zhang Yan pondered for a while, then stepped open the formation door and left the cave abode. He rode the clouds towards the 10 Peaks mountain. Not long after, he arrived at the top of the 10 Peaks mountain. He called out at the entrance of the cave abode and a sturdy servant girl invited him in. Hu Xian was holding a book in his hand and reading it attentively. Seeing him come in, he invited him to sit and said with a smile, "I haven't seen junior brother Zhang for a long time. I wonder what you have come to teach me today." He guessed in his heart that Zhang Yan had come for the sake of the disciple that was holding down the fort in that small sect. This wasn't strange at all because everyone knew the benefits of it, and there had been many people that had come looking for him earlier in hopes of obtaining a share of the spoils. Unexpectedly, after sitting down, Zhang Yan didn't talk about this matter. He couldn't help but be surprised. When he heard that the demon tribe from the North Underworld continent ate living people and even destroyed a few sects, Hu Xian's eyes suddenly changed. He was a person who was extremely good at seizing opportunities. He immediately saw that there was something to be done. After more than 2 years of planning, the matter of supporting the small sects had already made some headway. However, although those sects had expressed their intention to get close to them, they had never truly agreed. They were still somewhat hesitant. It was obvious that they wanted to obtain some benefits first before putting in any effort. How could Hu Xian allow this opening? If one clan gave benefits, then all the other clans would have to do the same. Even though the Yutzang sect was a large sect of Xianmen, it did not have many cultivation items for free. Even if he was the leader of the top 10 disciples, it was impossible for him to squander them and use them as a favor. He gradually lost his patience with this. Previously, he had used gentle methods and spoke kindly to the various sections. He had never spoken harshly. But now it seemed that he was too polite to this group of people before. He had to beat them up. To motivate these small sects, he had to use both hard and soft methods. Blindly expressing goodwill would be useless. Now that the disciples of the Devil clan were becoming more and more rampant in the Donghua continent, he had originally planned to choose a strong enough target to intimidate the small sects that were still uncertain. But now that the other 9 major sects were holding back, he was also hesitating whether the Qinsang school should be the first to step out. But if he started with the demon tribe, he wouldn't have to worry about this. He wouldn't have to immediately go against the devil clan, and he would have a suitable excuse. Zhang Yan's suggestion was exactly what he wanted. In the blink of an eye, numerous thoughts flashed through Huxian's mind. But at this moment, he suddenly came to an understanding. Obviously, Zhang Yan had noticed the reason behind this, so he seized the opportunity to give him a countermeasure. When he thought of this, he sighed in his heart. Zhang Yan had given him such an idea, and it could be considered that he had completely repaid the favor of giving him the purple abundance astral sand. Next time, it would be slightly difficult for him to ask Zhang Yan to help him. He shook his head, calmed his thoughts, and said in a low voice, "Junior brother is right. These few demon tribes dared to attack and kill the disciples of the Xianmen sect. Our Qinsang school, as a major sect of the Xianmen sect, cannot ignore such evildoers. We must eliminate them." After saying this, he looked at Zhang Yan and said, "But how do we eliminate these 3 demon tribes? Junior brother, do you have any ideas?" In the past 10,000 years, the Qinsang school had fought against the demon cultivators of the Northern Darkness continent many times. These 3 demon tribes were naturally not in Huxian's eyes. He only needed to send a few capable disciples to eliminate them. But if Zhang Yan had other plans, and he unintentionally disturbed them, then it would not be good. Therefore, he had to ask in advance. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Junior brother, I don't have any ideas. If it is possible, we can bring the disciples of the small sects on this trip. It will be good to let them see the methods of the Qinsang school." Huxian took a deep look at Zhang Yan and thought to himself, "Junior brother Zhang must be doing this for the sake of his own reputation. Looks like his ambition isn't small." However, with junior brother Zhang's lifespan and natural talent, it probably won't take him 100 years to reach my current position. His goal was the Temple Lord of the Daylight Temple. To him, the position of the first seat of the top 10 disciples was only a necessary path to achieve his goal. He did not place much importance on it. Instead, he somewhat approved of the drive that Zhang Yan had displayed. He thought that he had seen through Zhang Yan's intentions. But Zhang Yan had solved a problem for him. Now that he was in a good mood, he did not have the heart to stop him. He nodded and said, "Since this is junior brother's suggestion, you will be in charge of it. I will arrange the people. What do you think?" But Zhang Yan's answer once again exceeded Huxian's expectations. He only heard Zhang Yan say indifferently, "This time, there are 3 demon tribes that came from the Northern Darkness continent. Leave the Quanta tribe to me. As for the other 2 tribes, I will not overstep my authority." Chapter 406. Zhang Yan and Huxian discussed for a while and decided to leave in 3 days. As for the exact number of people, he wouldn't interfere. He said goodbye to the 10 Peaks mountain cave and returned to the clear darkness heavenly lake. After entering the main hall, he turned the small pot mirror. Light and shadow rippled, and the scene within the formation appeared. Seeing that the Wang sisters and Tian Kun were still fighting against the demonic cultivator Wang Kuejia, and because they were no longer in a life-threatening situation, with Wang Ziyuan and Yuan Yanhui taking care of them from time to time, the 3 disciples were initially very restrained, but now they were able to let go of their hands and feet, and they were even able to cooperate with each other. Zhang Yan thought, "The difference in cultivation between my 3 disciples and this beast cultivator is too big. It seems like they can only practice like this for now. In the future, when their cultivation increases, they can go out to train like Yan Yi." Thinking up to there, he glanced at Wang and Yuan Yanhui, and his expression changed slightly. The battle within the array lasted for an entire day. Seeing that his 3 disciples were extremely tired, Zhang Yan ordered the mirror spirit to send them out of the array and back into the cave. He then called Wang and Yuan Yanhui over. As soon as the 2 of them arrived at the hall, they greeted Zhang Yan and stood there with folded hands. Zhang Yan looked down and said in a low voice, "Now that the two of you have cultivated to the second level of the mystic light realm, let me ask you. Do you want to go out and search for herbs and try your luck, or do you want to stay in the cave and form the pills?" Hearing this, Yuan Yanhui didn't say anything and only looked at Wang Ziyuan. She trusted this senior brother very much, no matter what decision he made. No matter what decision he made, she would follow his lead. Logically speaking, the master and disciple lineage of the Yucang sect should have gone out to look for herbs, but Wang Ziyuan could tell from Zhang Yan's words that there was another option. They could condense the pill in this cave abode, and the manor lord would provide the external herbs they needed. Now, all he had to do was say the word, and the pill would be within his reach. This would save him a lot of effort. This was how shrewd Wang Ziyuan was. He couldn't help but be tempted. However, he was a calm and wise person after all. He felt that if they obtained the external medicine now, it would seem that they had taken less detours and gained a lot of advantages, but in reality, it was very likely that it would cause Zhang Yan to think that the two of them did not have a firm heart to cultivate. Perhaps he would not give up on them, but in the future, he would definitely not value them. This was losing the big picture for the small. On the other hand, if he gave up on the shortcut and chose to search for medicine, although it would be more twists and turns, he would be able to obtain more benefits in the long run. He didn't think for long before he came to a decision. Suppressing the temptation in his heart, he cupped his hands and said, "Manor head, if it's possible, please let us go out to search for medicine." Zhang Yan's eyes were calm as he said, "Have you made up your mind?" He had missed the opportunity. "Then there won't be any more." Wang Ziyuan bowed and said, "I have decided." Since he had already made up his mind, whether it was right or wrong, he would not change it. Zhang Yan said expressionlessly, "If that's the case, I will order Zhang Jing to give the two of you a talisman later. You can go back to your cultivation place and go out to search for medicine at any time." He waved his sleeve. A gust of wind blew in the main hall, and in an instant, the two of them were pushed out of the main hall. When the two of them came back to their senses, they were already outside the main hall. Yuan Yanhui's brows furrowed in worry as she asked, "Senior brother, is the manor head blaming us?" Wang Ziyuan smiled and said confidently, "Junior martial sister, it's the opposite. We have chosen the right path. If the palace lord blames us, why would he give us the talisman?" Yuan Yanhui tilted her head and thought about it. She felt that it was reasonable and said happily, "That's true." Since Wang Ziyuan entered the manor, although he looked relaxed on the surface, he was living under someone else's roof after all. His heart had been trembling as if he was walking on thin ice, for fear of doing something wrong. But now he calmed down a little. He let out a long breath and said in a relaxed tone, "Junior martial sister, go back and pack up. We will go out to search for medicine." Yuan Yanhui seemed to be infected by his mood. She smiled charmingly and said, "Yes, senior martial brother." After Zhang Yan dismissed the two of them, he shouted and said, "Zhang Jing, bring me the monster cultivator." The mirror spirit took the order and activated the mountain guarding formation to move a little. Then, Wang Kuejia was sent out and thrown into the main hall. Wang Kuejia was fighting with several juniors. Every time he attacked, he was protected by the formation. He was full of anger and had nowhere to vent it. Suddenly, the scene in front of him changed. His head was heavy and his feet were light. He fell to the ground. When he crawled up, he raised his head and saw Zhang Yan sitting in the middle of the hall. He immediately knew that Zhang Yan was the master of the hall. He shouted loudly and relying on his thick skin and thick flesh, he rushed forward and threw a punch towards Zhang Yan's face. Immediately the hall was filled with a whistling sound and a fierce gust of wind surged, pressing down on Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan sneered. He raised his hand and grabbed Wang Kuejia's fist. With a little force, he flipped Wang Kuejia over. Wang Kuejia was dizzy from the fall, but he didn't want to admit defeat. He howled at the sky and twisted his body, stirring up a fishy smell on the ground. In the swirling black wind, an ironback blue wolf with erect ears and a long snout, white fur, and brown eyes appeared. There was a hint of cruelty in its fierce eyes. It paused with its 4 claws, stepped on the smoke, and pounced again. But this time, before it could even get close, Zhang Yan just flicked his finger, and a dozen drops of dark heavy water shot out like pearls, and they struck Wang Kuejia's body in succession, causing numerous muffled bangs to resound out. Even though Wang Kuejia cultivated in the path of strength and had a sturdy body, he was unable to endure such an impact. Not only did bloody holes appear all over his body, even his iron bones were on the verge of breaking. This round of attacks from Zhang Yan had forced him to retreat more than 10 feet away. Just now, Wang Kuejia stopped. He shook his body, and his wounds instantly closed. He stared at Zhang Yan. Only then did he realize that this person in front of him was not someone to be trifled with. He didn't give up. He rolled on the ground and stood up again. With a shake of his hand, a pair of copper whips appeared out of nowhere. He held them in his left and right hands. With a laugh, his body suddenly grew to 30 feet tall, like a giant. He only took 1 step forward and was in front of Zhang Yan. He raised the copper whips high and smashed them down. Zhang Yan turned a blind eye to the incoming force. His expression didn't change. He cast a spell, and a big yellow hand rose from the top of his head. It grabbed Wang Kuejia's body and picked him up and threw him dozens of feet away. Wang Kuejia fell on his back and felt numb all over. Wang Kuejia's chest heaved up and down. He wailed and threw away the 2 copper whips. He gave up and said, "I'm no match for a Taoist like you. If you want to kill me, do it." Zhang Yan laughed and shook his head. He said, "I heard that you're the personal guard of the monster king Quan He of the Quanta tribe. I thought you were someone special, but now it seems that you're nothing special. I'm really disappointed." Wang Kuejia hated it when people looked down on his tribe. Hearing this, he suddenly became angry and shouted, "Bullshit! Bullshit! I'm the personal guard of General Han Guang, who is under the command of the king. How can I be compared to the king?" Zhang Yan said lightly, "I heard from Lady Luo that the king you mentioned is only at the level of turning Dan, but I can't see any difference between him and you." Hearing this, Wang Kuejia was even more angry. He said, "You're talking nonsense. My king is a descendant of the heavenly wolf. He has the bloodline of a big monster. How can a little monster like me compare to him?" He talked non-stop, and the more he talked, the more excited he became. Zhang Yan stabbed him from time to time. Unknowingly, he revealed part of the Quanta tribe's secrets. Zhang Yan listened for a while and finally nodded with a smile. He said, "I see. I was worried that I didn't know how to deal with the Quanta tribe. Thank you for telling me the details." Wang Kuejia was stunned. Then he realized that he was tricked. He scolded, "You're not a good person. How dare you trick me?" Zhang Yan already knew what he wanted to know. Wang Kuejia was no longer useful in front of him. He didn't want to argue with this kind of monster. He waved his hand and ordered the mirror spirit to trap him in the array again. He knew from Luo Xiao that in the Quanta tribe, the highest level of cultivation was only the level of turning Dan. But among the monster cultivators, even if they were in the same level, their cultivation would be different because of their cultivation and bloodline. It could even be said that the difference was like heaven and earth. Those ordinary little monsters could only bully mortals with their monster bodies. They usually couldn't compete with the disciples of the Xianmen sect. Only those who made great contributions or those who were talented could get the blood and bones of the big monster or the tribe leader to get rid of the turbidity, improve their cultivation, and even reverse the body of the big monster. Looking at the cultivation of a monster cultivator, one only needed to look at his background to know his cultivation. Those like Luo Xiao who chose the path of Qi were, after all, the minority among the monster cultivators. Zhang Yan originally planned to take a few disciples to watch the battle. But after listening to Wang Kuejia, he knew that Quan He was a descendant of the heavenly wolf tribe. There were also a few strong people in the tribe who were not easy to deal with. After thinking for a while, he felt that he could come and go freely. If there was any danger, he could escape in time. After making up his mind, he returned to the small pot mirror and meditated. 3 days later, Zhang Yan woke up from his meditation. He waved his sleeves and turned into a light smoke. He went out of the cave and came to the Heaven Lake. After Shang Chang's arrangement, there were many elegant pavilions and waterside pavilions. He came to a small pavilion near the lake and stood with his hands behind his back. At this moment, the sky was high and the sun was bright. The clear blue water was sparkling. The scenery was very pleasant. It made people want to go fishing. According to the agreement, Hu Xian would send disciples to meet with him today. They would go to kill the monster tribe together. Just as he was thinking about who Hu Xian would send, he suddenly felt something and couldn't help but look up. In midair, there was a beautiful and celestial woman walking over from the clouds with light steps. Every step she took caused a cloud of mist to form beneath her feet, and it was clear and smooth like jade, extremely elegant and pure. She wore a lotus-colored skirt. Her waist was slender and there was a butterfly ornament on her hair. The ornaments clashed and made a sweet sound. Before she arrived, there was an elegant fragrance. Zhang Yan was a little surprised. He thought that the person who would go with him would be Fang Zhenlu. He didn't expect it to be this woman. He took a step forward and said, "So it's senior sister Han. Sorry for not going out to meet you." Han Sui landed on the ground and curtsied. He said quietly, "Junior brother Zhang, I am well. Senior brother Hu ordered me to go with you to eliminate the evildoers." Chapter 407. When Zhang Yan saw Han Sui arrive, he invited her to sit in the pavilion. He clapped his hands, and ripples appeared in the heavenly pond. A bell-like laugh rang out, and a beautiful woman stepped out of the water, carrying a lotus leaf that was moist from the rain. She gracefully came over and placed 2 clam cups on the stone table in the pavilion. One of the cups was clear dew. Han Sui's expression was tranquil, and she said, "Junior brother Zhang, I don't usually touch a drop of wine." Zhang Yan smiled, and said, "Senior sister, you misunderstand. This is the jade dew condensed from the shell of my heavenly pond. It's sweet and mellow, not water wine." He picked up a cup, raised his hand, and made a gesture of respect, and said, "Please." Han Sui glanced at him, stretched out her slender fingers, and picked up the clam cup. She covered her face with her sleeves, and without moving her upper body, she drank the jade dew. Zhang Yan also picked up the clam cup, and drank it in one gulp. After Han Sui drank it, she suddenly felt a cool and refreshing feeling spread through her body. Her body became light, and her mind became clear. She praised, and said, "Not bad." She had a cold personality, and normally she cultivated in her cave. Aside from the cultivators of her clan, she rarely interacted with people of the same sect. According to her intentions, although she was going to sweep the demon department with Zhang Yan, it would be best if they didn't meet. But before she left, Hu Xian came to find her, and asked her to give an item to Zhang Yan, as a sign of his solemnity. Facing the 10th disciple's seat, she couldn't refuse, so she could only agree, and personally came to see Zhang Yan. But she wasn't good at beating around the bush, and after a moment of silence, she said, "Junior brother Zhang, you're usually alone outside, and I'm afraid you're used to riding the wind and traversing the clouds. But now you're one of the 10 disciples of my Qinsang school. But this time, we're sweeping the demon department to intimidate the small sects, and if you don't have a ride, I'm afraid it's inappropriate. Senior brother Hu ordered me to come first, and deliver this flying starry palace that Baoyang courtyard built for you." She flicked a jade bracelet lightly, and a speck of starlight flew out and landed above the heaven lake. In the blink of an eye, it transformed into a small city that was 2,500 feet in length and width. It had jade steps and copper pillars, and was surrounded by clouds. The 4 corners of the flying palace were watchtowers. The main hall in the middle of the palace was majestic and magnificent. Flowers and trees were planted all around the hall, and there were even a few clear and long crane cries coming from inside. This time, the the Qinsang school dispatched cultivators to kill the cultivators of the demon division. It wasn't just Zhang Yan and Han Sui. Aside from the disciples in the sect, there were also disciples from smaller sections. They were the face of Qinsang school, so they couldn't be too shabby. Zhang Yan glanced at it and did not decline. He cupped his hands and said, "Then it would be impolite for me to refuse." Han Sui completed Hu Xian's task and was about to leave. He asked, "When will junior brother depart?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Senior sister Rushi is fine. I'll make some arrangements and then we'll set off." Han Sui did not say anything else. She stood up and bent her knees. She stepped on a cloud of smoke and flew into the sky. At this moment, a magnificent flying palace with colorful flowers hanging on it floated out of the clouds. She waved her sleeves. She waved her sleeves and disappeared. Zhang Yan noticed that there were many ships following the flying palace. They were densely packed, and there were probably more than 100 of them. They were all emitting light and smoke, which spread for more than 100 miles. Other than that, there were also many feathered knights riding on cranes and riding beasts. He roughly estimated that there were about 500 to 600 disciples in the sect, and that didn't include the cultivators from the smaller sections. Looking at the formation, Hu Xian took this matter very seriously. It was the first time he had sent disciples out on an expedition. It was possible that there were elders with higher statuses than him and Han Sui. Zhang Yan sat for a while longer and drank a few more cups of rain and dew. Then, he stood up and soared into the sky, heading for his flying palace. After he got on the flying palace, he went straight to the main hall. He crossed the 3 jade bridges in front of the door and entered the hall. He sat in the hall and saw that there were incense burners and bronze cranes. There were cups with pearls on the walls. It was not much different from his cave abode. He couldn't help but sigh. When he went on an expedition to the 3 pools, he followed Fan Chongqing there and sat in a flying palace like this. He didn't expect that after so many years, he would also have one. However, Fan Chongqing's flying palace was built by the Spiritual Mechanism Institute. Although the shape was similar, it was actually very crude. As for his, it was specially built by the Baoyang Institute for the top 10 disciples. Only the top 10 disciples could sit on it. It was unknown how much more majestic it was than the one Fan Chongqing sat on. After the sex competition, the Baoyang Institute started building this item. However, the institute was controlled by the aristocratic families. If Zhang Yan wanted to smoothly take this item, he would have to go through some trouble. But this time, under pressure from Hu Xian, he reluctantly took it out. With this item in hand, the demon division was in an invincible position. Even if there were Yuanying cultivators in front of him, he would be able to hold them off for a while. Zhang Yan looked to his left and right and realized that it was rather deserted if he was alone. Moreover, if he were to leave the palace, he would have to leave someone behind to guard this place. After thinking for a while, he picked up a brush and wrote a letter. Not long after, Shang Chang came in with a dozen servant girls and strong men. After entering the hall to greet him, they dispersed. They lit the incense burners, lifted the pearl curtains, and sprinkled dew. After tidying up, the hall was no longer cold. It became warm and harmonious. When Zhang Yan saw that they had tidied up, he picked up the talisman in front of the main table. He activated it, and the starry flying palace made a loud noise. It rose from the ground and rushed into the clouds, taking the lead. Seeing that his flying palace had moved, Han Sui's flying palace followed suit. It took hundreds of cultivators to the northwest of the East Flower Continent. The only time the Dark Azure sect had made such a move with such great fanfare was during the expedition to the 3 pools all those years ago, and it instantly drew the attention of the various sections. There were also many great cultivators that shot their gazes over as they guessed exactly what they were doing. But Hu Xian had planned to do this. He wanted to build up his reputation, so the bigger the commotion, the better. As for whether or not the 3 tribes would retreat to the North Ocean continent after learning of this, there was no need to worry. No matter how fast they traveled on the ground, could they be faster than the flying palace? 10 days later, the two flying palaces arrived at the bank of a large river. Zhang Yan was familiar with the geography, so he knew that this river was called the Shang River. 1,000 miles north, there were mountains and rivers. It could be considered the natural boundary between the East Flower Continent and the North Ocean Continent. According to what Luo Xiao said, the three groups of demons were loitering around this place. But when he looked around, he saw that there was no one on the plains north of the river. But looking at the messy traces left behind, it also showed that there were at least tens of thousands of people staying here a few days ago. He thought to himself, could it be that the demon tribes returned to the North Ocean Continent? At this moment, Shang Chang came to the hall and reported, "Master, there is a demon cultivator outside the flying palace. He said he was appointed by the Xian men to guard the river here. He has something to report to you." Zhang Yan was about to ask about the whereabouts of the three demon tribes. Hearing this, he thought, I forgot about this. This person came at the right time. In this river, there were many demons. Although they were also demon cultivators, they were subdued by the Xian men long ago. They were given talismans to guard the river and the gate. Usually, they enjoyed the offerings of the people on the shore. Zhang Yan was used to being alone, so he did not think of them just now. So he nodded and said in a low voice, "Call him in." Not long after, a black-faced fish demon with a worried face entered the hall under the guidance of Shang Chang. When he saw Zhang Yan, he knelt on the ground and said in a trembling voice, "Little demon, Ming Shi, greets the Qinsang schoolmaster." Zhang Yan took a look and said, "You are the river guardian of this place." Although Zhang Yan's voice was light, in the eyes of the black-faced fish monster, there was a great majesty hidden in it. He didn't even dare to breathe loudly. He kowtowed and said respectfully, "Yes, I am." Although he was appointed by the Xian men, the Qinsang school dominated the north of Donghua. In reality, he only listened to the orders of the Qinsang school. He was also afraid that the Taoists from the Qinsang school would know that Zhang Yan's identity was not simple just by looking at the flying palace, so he was even more careful. Zhang Yan said again, "Let me ask you, where are the demon tribes that were here a few days ago?" The black-faced fish demon said with a trembling voice, reporting to Exalted Master. Ever since the three demon tribes entered the Donghua continent, they have already broken through a few border cities of the Wei Kingdom. 10 days ago, they probably ran out of food, so they crossed the river and headed towards the direction of the Yong continent of the Wei Kingdom. I was unable to stop them. Please punish me. As he finished, he kowtowed heavily on the ground again. His forehead was bleeding. Although the black-faced fish demon had thousands of marine animals under his command, he was good at dealing with a few wandering ghosts. However, this time, the three demon tribes had joined forces to go south to the Donghua continent. There were no less than 100,000 of them crossing the river. They did not dare to stop them. They were so scared that they abandoned their residences. They were extremely afraid that Zhang Yan would kill them. Zhang Yan laughed coldly and said, "These demons are really bold." The reason why he did not think too much about crossing the river was that out of the tens of thousands of demon tribes, only about 100 of them knew how to fly. It was fine on the north bank. If they saw something was wrong, they could leave at any time. However, if they crossed the river, once they were targeted by the Xian men, they would all stay on the south bank. The risk was too great. How could the demons of the three tribes not know about this? Therefore, for the past few months, the demons of the three tribes had been moving along the river and did not cross it. However, along the way, they ate and drank like locusts. The villages and cities were all destroyed. There was no trace of people, birds, and beasts. There was no food to be found north of the river. However, they had tasted the sweetness. If they returned to the North Darkland continent, they would not be willing. But staying here would only mean starvation. Thinking about how no cultivators from the Xian men came to stop them in the past few months, they gathered their courage and crossed the river. The black-faced fish demon heard Zhang Yan's tone. It seemed that he had no intention of pursuing the matter. He quickly said, "Master, you will definitely be able to turn the situation around this time. You can turn the tides with a flip of your hand. You can turn the tides with a flip of your hand. You can kill them all." Because this Hisho was in charge of a territory, he often went to the nearby provinces and counties to meet with the gentry and county officials. He learned a lot of bootlicking skills, but his words were incoherent and nondescript, making all the maids in the hall cover their mouths and chuckle. Zhang Yan frowned and ignored him. He only said, "Go to the flying palace behind me and report the situation." The black-faced fish demon did not dare disobey. He said a few more words that he thought were pretty, and then excitedly left the flying palace to see Han Suyi. Zhang Yan closed his eyes to rest. Not long after, he saw a letter flying over. It was written by Han Suyi himself. On it were 6 words, "Killed. Follow the master's orders." After he looked at it, he activated the talisman. The flying palace shook and flew in the direction of the Wei Kingdom's Yongzhou. Chapter 408. There weren't many people on the south bank of the Shanghe River. Most of the trees were tall and ancient. There were only a few mountain paths leading to Wei. However, the army of over 100,000 demons charged forward, regardless of whether there was a path or not. When they encountered a mountain, they opened a mountain, and when they encountered water, they filled up a river. They were like a torrent, and everywhere they passed seemed to have been plowed. Groups of beasts fled, birds flew in panic, and the demonic chi that shot into the sky could be seen from over 50 kilometers away. Chuizhou was the largest city in the northwest of Wei. Governor Yang Pai was a capable official. At this moment, the city was filled with soldiers. Crossbows, poisoned water, and rolling stones were all prepared. Other than that, there were some Taoists working on the city wall. They used wooden swords to carry the talisman and chanted some incantation. They were summoned by the nearby Taoist palaces to help defend the city. A few days ago, there was news that Yongzhou city had turned into a ghost town. The 70,000 people in the city had been devoured by the demons. Therefore, the city had to be on high alert. Beside Governor Yang stood an elegant young Taoist dressed in a coarse blue robe. He took a few glances and said worriedly, "Sir Yang, these Taoist friends are good at drawing talismans to catch ghosts and praying to cure illnesses. They're good, but they're still not enough to deal with those demons." Governor Yang thought highly of this Taoist. He smiled bitterly, "Taoist Jiang, how could I not know that? But it's better than nothing. Otherwise, before the demons attack, the entire city will be wiped out. They can run, but I can't. The people in the city can't either." Taoist Jiang sighed, "What a pity, I's magic power is weak. If my master was here, he wouldn't let these demons run wild." Governor Yang knew this was Taoist Jiang's ability. Not to mention anything else, just the fact that he was able to fly in the sky without the help of any magic tools was enough to prove that he was the only Taoist he had ever seen. Hearing him mention his master, Governor Yang couldn't help but ask, "Which immortal is your master? Can you ask him to come and save the people?" Taoist Jiang's expression was sad. He shook his head slowly. Governor Yang couldn't help but be disappointed. To him, Taoist Jiang's cultivation was unimaginable. Wouldn't his master's magic power be unbelievably high? But such a celestial being couldn't save the people. He couldn't help but say, "It's hard to find the immortals, but how can the common people be blamed for this disaster?" Taoist Jiang had no other choice. Back then, his teacher had only passed on a cultivation technique to him. Later, by chance, he had stumbled upon the abode of a cultivator who had passed away in meditation deep in the mountains. Just now, he was able to condense the mystic light. However, he did not know which sect his master was from, nor did he know where he was right now. He only remembered that elegant and majestic figure back then. How was he supposed to answer this? When an advisor saw the governor in such a state, he came up and bowed. "Don't be anxious, sir. This lowly one has a solution. It can stop demons. Governor Yang raised his head in surprise. His expression became somewhat more spirited as he anxiously said, "Since you have an idea, why don't you tell me quickly?" The advisor pointed to the surging river 5 miles outside the city and said, "Sir, please look." This was the Long River, the water surging violently, flowing endlessly. This type of heaven and earth whaley was 10 times greater than that of demons. Send people to dig it up. Before he finished, Yang Taisho's expression changed abruptly. He shouted, "Shut up!" Since the advisor had come up with this idea, he had already thrown caution to the wind. He was actually not afraid in the slightest. He knelt down with a plop and said, "Sir, it's true that the common people's homes can't be protected, but we can definitely stop them from going south. Sir, even if we sacrifice our prefecture, we can still save the people of the world." How could Yang Taisho not know that this method was feasible? However, once the Long River was opened, everything within 1,000 miles would become a country of water. It was unknown how many people would die in this flood. Not only that, he would also have to bear this eternal infamy. Even if he went underground, he probably wouldn't be able to rest in peace. No matter how hard the advisor tried to persuade him, he wouldn't listen. He even ordered people to drag him away and use cloth to cover his mouth. At this moment, 50 miles outside of Weizhou City, Monster King Quan He stood on a mound. More than 10 demons surrounded him. Behind him were the demons of Quanta tribe that covered the mountains and plains. He was dressed in a golden robe and looked mighty and strong. His eyebrows were like swords and his eyes were like stars. There was no demonic aura on his face. He looked at the faintly visible Long River and said, "I heard that this Weizhou city is the largest city in the northwestern region. It has a population of 200,000. It's a meathead indeed. However, it's not easy to cross the river. General Han, bring your personal guards and occupy this city for me. Snatch the meat and share it with your men." General Han was 15 feet tall. He had a rough face and protruding teeth. He was a cultivator of strength path and could change his body size. However, he especially liked to be this majestic. Upon hearing this, he said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, don't worry. This time, without the 2 tribes fighting over it, the people in this city will definitely be our meal." Although the demons of the 3 tribes combined were powerful, it was still not enough. Therefore, after they left the mountain, they split up. Since Quanta tribe was the strongest, Weizhou City became the meat next to their mouth. General Han casually bowed to Quanta tribe and waved his hand. He brought more than 10 personal guards who could fly, stirred up a fierce black wind and flew towards Weizhou City. Quanta tribe looked at him and suddenly felt a little uneasy. Even though he led the crowd all the way here and the journey was extremely smooth and didn't encounter any obstruction, but crossing the river and going deep into the country of Wei wasn't what he wanted. However, he was the new tribe leader, so if he wanted to convince the crowd, he could only obey the will of the few demon generals in the tribe. However, after crossing the river, if there were Xian men who came to kill the demons, it would be difficult for him to escape unscathed. Just as he was feeling annoyed, the personal guard beside him suddenly pointed to the sky and said, "Your Majesty, what's that?" Quanta tribe looked up and his pupils shrank. He said, "The flying palace of Starry Pivot." His heart couldn't help but sink. What he was afraid of had really happened. Among the Xian men in the north of Donghua, only Qinsang School could have a flying palace. To be able to use a flying palace as a mount, one had to be at least a core formation cultivator. However, what shocked him was yet to come. In the blink of an eye, another flying palace leaped out of the clouds. Behind it, there seemed to be countless flying boats and celestial birds. Seeing such a scene, the demons below were also a little flustered. They said, "Your Majesty, it's the disciples of Xian men. What should we do?" Quanta tribe said sternly, "What are you panicking for? Look at that flying palace, there are only 2 core formation cultivators. Those behind are just there to make up the numbers. We have more than 40,000 people. Even if we double the number, what are we afraid of? When the demons heard this, they felt that it made sense and calmed down a little. Quanta Tribe clenched his fists. Only he knew that once Chinsung's school made a move, how could they not be fully prepared? This time, they had come with a thunderous attack. Taking a step back, even if he could repel all the enemies in front of him, it would be impossible for them to return to the north bank safely. Meanwhile, in the flying palace, Zhang Yan waved his sleeves. Smoke rose up from the jade steps in front of the palace, revealing the scene below. He stood up and looked down. The demons were like ants, and the ground was like a thick carpet. Tens of thousands of demons couldn't hide their movements at all. In less than 2 hours, they had caught up. He thought about it for a moment. Just now, the tall demon general was heading in the direction of Weizhou. Although there were only a dozen or so demon cultivators, it wouldn't be difficult for them to wipe out an entire city. Therefore, he couldn't just sit back and watch. He had to kill them first. As for here, with Han Sui there, he didn't have to worry about them escaping. Therefore, he ignored the demons below. He activated the flying palace and flew over them, heading in the direction of Weizhou. General Han flew with his guards. In less than a moment, he was in the sky above Weizhou city. The city walls were tall and majestic, but in his eyes, they were like paper. He laughed viciously and stopped using his flying technique. He didn't even take out a weapon. He just dropped down from the sky. The people on the city wall were shocked to see a giant demon descending from the sky. Before he even landed, the soldiers on the city wall had already scattered. Daoist Jiang saw that things weren't going well. He grabbed Yang Taisho, released his mystic light, and soared into the sky to avoid the attack. There was a loud rumble, and dust flew everywhere. Bricks and stones were sent flying. The city wall collapsed under General Han's stomp. Some of the officials and the old and weak soldiers who didn't have time to escape died on the spot. General Han saw the panicked people around him. He laughed and opened his mouth, revealing a bloody mouth. He took a deep breath, and the soldiers who ran away were swept back into his mouth by a gust of wind. He chewed a few times, and the sound of bones cracking and flesh rotting could be heard. After a moment, blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Seeing him eat people alive, some of the braver soldiers were so frightened that they threw away their weapons and fled in all directions. Yang Taisho's eyes turned red. He cried out, "Daoist Jiang, don't worry about me. Go and stop this demon." His cry immediately attracted General Han's attention. He turned around and saw the two of them being carried in the air by the mystic light. He chuckled and punched upward. Daoist Jiang was shocked. He knew he was no match for this demon, but just as he was about to dodge, he found that his body was being pulled by a whirlpool. He couldn't dodge at all. At this critical moment, he formed a spell and a green light appeared on his body. He shook his body and slipped away. General Han let out a cry of surprise. He didn't expect his punch to miss. Just as he was about to attack again, he suddenly saw a cold light flying toward him. That coldness caused all the hair on his body to stand on end. In a hurry, he raised his arm to block in front of him. With a "Kacha," this ray of light actually chopped off one of his wrists. General Han was shocked and angry. He said, "Who attacked your general? You're just a demon. How dare you call yourself a general?" As the voice sounded in the air, the clouds parted and a handsome Taoist walked over from the sky. His sleeves fluttered in the wind, and his body was surrounded by smoke. General Han couldn't help but take a few steps back. This Taoist actually gave him a lot of pressure. He roared angrily and circulated his cultivation technique. His wrist grew out once again. Then, he spread out his hands and threw out a coiled long saber. He stomped his feet and leaped into the air. With another loud shout, he raised his arms and slashed down with the saber. Zhang Yan sneered and pointed with his finger. A bolt of purple lightning flew out. In an instant, the light illuminated the sky and landed on General Han's body. A thunderous boom resounded in the sky. The entire city seemed to be shaking. Everyone present lost their balance and fell to the ground. When they looked at General Han again, not even his bones were left. He had turned into ashes. Chapter 409. General Han was in too much of a hurry. He rode the wind and clouds ahead of them, so his guards were left behind. When they arrived, they just happened to see that Zhang Yan had used a purple firmament thunderbolt to strike him to death, and his flesh and bones had turned into ashes. This scene made them abnormally horrified. After letting out a shout, they desperately flew back. Zhang Yan stood in the air with his hands clasped behind his back. He knew that Han Sui and his men had surrounded them. These evildoers couldn't escape, so he didn't chase them. The people in the city saw him descend from the sky. With a wave of his hand, he summoned lightning and swept away the evildoers. They thought that he was a real immortal descending from the heavens. They all knelt down and worshipped him. They called out, "Immortal," and kept kowtowing. Yang Taisho was also very excited. He shouted, "The heavens have not destroyed our Chuezhou. With the help of such an immortal, the people of Chuezhou will be safe. Daoist Jiang, please bring me forward. I want to meet this immortal." At this moment, Jiang Zheng seemed to be stunned when he saw Zhang Yan. Governor Yang called out to him several times before he regained his senses. He suddenly circulated his profound light and arrived in front of Zhang Yan. He suddenly knelt down on the cloud and choked with sobs. "Little brother Jiang Zheng is so fortunate to be able to see Master's immortal face again today." After saying that, he prostrated himself and respectfully kowtowed 3 times. Zhang Yan looked at him and asked, "You are the young man from that day?" Jiang Zheng was excited to see that his master still remembered him. He bowed again and said, "Yes, I am." Zhang Yan looked at him again and nodded. He sighed, "You didn't have anyone to guide you, but you still managed to cultivate to this level. That is very rare." That day when the long river burst its dike, Jiang Zheng and his fellow villagers were trapped on a hill. That day, Zhang Yan happened to pass by, so he conveniently rescued Jiang Zheng and his dozen or so villagers. Because he saw that Jiang Zheng's bone structure was acceptable, and he also had some intelligence, Zhang Yan specially gave him a talisman. It was this talisman that allowed Jiang Zheng to peek into the path of cultivation. Different from the cultivation methods of mortals, Zhang Yan not only gave him a cultivation method, but he also told him where to get the jade elixir essence pool for opening meridians. It was just one more piece of advice. After he condensed his essence, he was able to open his meridians in a declining family with the surname Han. Later, when he traveled the world, he found a cave abode of a predecessor and was able to cultivate to the mystic light realm. Yang Taisho was shocked. So this Daoist was Daoist Zhang's teacher. He thought that this Daoist must have predicted that his disciple was in trouble and came to help. He could not help but exclaim in his heart that he was extremely fortunate. He carefully sized up Zhang Yan. Although this immortal looked to be in his 20s, he understood that one could not judge the age of a person who could fly in the sky and summon lightning based on his appearance. This Daoist young, but he Daoist was A young. He tidied up his attire and bowed solemnly. "Thank you, immortal elder, for protecting us and saving the lives of the people in the city." "How should I address you, immortal elder?" Zhang Yan smiled. Instead of replying, he asked, "Are you the governor of this place?" Yang Taisho quickly bowed and said, "That's me." Zhang Yan's expression was indifferent as he said, "Go and pacify the people in the city. As long as they don't leave the city, I will be able to protect them." Governor Yang bowed deeply to Zhang Yan and said in admiration, "Daoist Zhang has the will of heaven. On behalf of the people of Chuezhou, I thank you for your kindness." He made up his mind and said, "If this immortal can survive this disaster, I will definitely find a painter to worship him and ensure that his incense will never end." At the same time, Han Sui flew Star Pivot Flying Palace above the monsters. Below the main hall of the flying palace, other than her, there were about 50 disciples, some sitting and some standing. They looked at the monsters below and were all eager to try. These were all her Han clansmen and disciples. They had followed her on this trip to exterminate the demon tribe in exchange for karma. Han Sui looked around and had a plan. She flipped her wrist and took out a set of formation flags. She ordered, Zhen Wan, bring more disciples. Set up a formation about 100 miles from the east to the west. Hearing her order, a beautiful female disciple came forward to receive the order. She moved quickly and picked about 20 disciples in one breath. Then, she brought them out of the palace to set up the formation. Han Sui's trusted servant girl asked curiously, "Mother, why didn't you lock all 4 sides?" It wasn't hard to kill these small monsters, but if they escaped into the forest, it would be difficult to eradicate them. Han Sui said calmly, "I see that the Demon King has some skill. It's hard to deal with a trapped beast. I'm not as powerful as Senior Brother Du and Senior Brother Shao, and I'm not as powerful as Senior Brother Hua, who has the Chen clan to rely on. It's not easy to train these disciples. Now that the demonic calamity is upon us, we need to preserve some of our strength. We can't die here. If we leave a way out ahead, these monsters won't fight us to the death." A look of understanding appeared on the maidservant's face. She suddenly smiled and said, "It's just that with Mother's arrival, it'll be difficult for Manorhead Zhang. He's not like us, coming here alone. I'm afraid he'll be in a mess." Han Sui shook her head and said, "That's where you're wrong. I've seen Junior Brother Zhang's power in the competition. Just wait and see. These monsters won't be able to get past him." Monster King Quan had gathered his guards and was ready to lead his people to fight to the death. But when he saw that the people from Qinsang School weren't in a hurry to surround them, and instead scattered, he was stunned. It was just as Han Sui expected. He didn't have the time to think about what they were thinking. He shouted, "Children, follow me across the river." They were in an open area with nowhere to escape. If they were to fight here, they would definitely be at a disadvantage. However, as long as they entered the human city, he didn't believe that the Yutsang sect would be able to attack without restraint. At that time, they could disperse their troops and escape separately. They could go to the wilderness or to the densely populated areas. That way, they wouldn't be completely annihilated here. At this moment, the dozen or so personal guards of General Han ran back. They cried miserably, "Your Majesty, General Han, General Han." General Han was Quan He's confidant. He thought about the flying palace and felt something was wrong. He shouted, "What happened to General Han?" General Han was killed by a Daoist's lightning. Fiendish demons were afraid of lightning spells. Quan He's heart skipped a beat when he heard that, but then he asked, "Just one person? Did you see it clearly?" The guard said, "Yes, only one person." Quan He suddenly felt a sense of hope. Since there was only one Daoist blocking the way, it was better than dealing with hundreds of Xianmen cultivators behind him, no matter how powerful the opponent was. No matter how strong the opponent was, even if his magic power was high, he could still lead a few dozen guards. Even if he didn't kill the enemy, he could at least force them to retreat and open up a path for his people. After he made up his mind, he waved his hand and gave the order to move forward. Among the tens of thousands of people, there was a rumbling drum. With the rumbling of the drums, tens of thousands of demons shouted in unison and jumped into the long river, rushing towards the other side. The ferocious momentum and the rolling demon clouds made Governor Yang and his subordinates' expressions change. They were worried that Zhang Yan could stop them all by himself. When Zhang Yan saw this scene, he couldn't help but laugh. Senior Sister Han is quite open-minded. Han Sui's way of handling the situation wasn't good, but it was within the norm. There was nothing wrong with it. If the demons really did rush past him, she would have to bear the consequences. She was confident that Zhang Yan could stop the demons, so she used this method. She was convinced that Zhang Yan could stop the tens of thousands of monsters head-on, so she used this method. Zhang Yan laughed and used his teleportation divine ability. With a single step, he arrived at the bank of the long river and sat down in midair. He shook his shoulders slightly and said, "Rise." There was a loud sound and a water light that covered the sky flashed behind him. There seemed to be endless waves that rolled on the other side of the river. Ever since he broke out of his shell, his magic power had more than doubled. At this moment, the true light spread out for more than 10,000 feet. Moreover, the water vapor was endless, stirring up the spiritual opportunity. The water of the long river was like a tide, rolling like it was boiling. The demon cultivators that crossed the river were clueless and didn't know how powerful the divine ability was. They screamed and crashed into the water. They couldn't move the water light at all. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared. In just a moment, more than 100 demon cultivators disappeared. Zhang Yan saw that there were still a few demon cultivators who had come ashore but had not fallen into the trap. He let out a shout and activated his first-grade golden core. Under the guidance of the incantation, the fiendish aura circulating around his body instantly turned into rays of true light, trapping all the fish that had slipped through the net. With his full strength, this streak of true light once again extended over 1,000 zhang. Only then did it stop. The sound of water between heaven and earth was loud, filled with the sound of surging waves. If it wasn't for the fact that they personally saw him casting the spell, they would have suspected that the long river had truly burst its banks. With him blocking the demons that came fell into the trap. Yang Taisho and the others were amazed and thought that this was the work of a god. Jiang Zheng was also dazzled. He walked around the mortal world and came into contact with cultivators from other sections. His instinct told him that the teacher who taught him the technique was not ordinary. He was afraid that it was a cultivator from one of the big sections. Now that he saw it, he believed it. Demon King Quan He's face changed. A demon general next to him advised, "King, this Taoist is strong. Why don't we go back and kill him?" Quan He's face was solemn. Seeing Zhang Yan's technique, he knew that he wasn't easy to deal with. No wonder he dared to block the way alone. But if he didn't get rid of this Taoist, his troops would have no way out. He gritted his teeth and said, "Go back. Can we go back? If we go back, we'll die. It's just one person, what's there to be afraid of?" As he spoke, Han Sui saw that Zhang Yan's attack was so loud. She also came out from the flying palace. She made a spell and jade clouds flew out from her body. They were like drops of water from a spring. They didn't stop and covered a few miles of clear sky. She pointed down and the clouds fell down, chasing after the tens of thousands of demons. The small demons didn't know what was going on and were immediately trapped. When the colorful clouds floated past, they were all lying on the ground. This was one of Qinsang School's divine arts. It was called Illusionary Cloud Jade Smoke. This divine art was good for group battles. Anyone who was touched by the jade smoke, those with weaker cultivation would have their senses blocked and they would faint on the spot. Even those with higher cultivation would be blinded and deaf if they didn't have a way to break the light smoke. They wouldn't be able to tell north from south. They would be at the mercy of the enemy. If the smoke didn't go away, no matter how strong you were, you wouldn't be able to use it. Seeing this, Quan He was shocked and angry. There were strong enemies in front and behind him. His tribe was on the brink of destruction. He didn't have time to think. He released a loud roar, his voice piercing through the horizon. Pressing down with his hand, his body suddenly rose to a height of around 300 zhang. He took a step forward, crossing the long river with just a single step. Raising his mountainous palm, he slapped towards Zhang Yan. "Dear. If you think this site is good, please remember to help me promote it. This site." Chapter 410. Quan He's palm strike had the power to destroy a mountain. He wanted to force Zhang Yan away so that the demons behind him could cross the river and rush into Chuizhou City. Zhang Yan smiled and activated his Xian Qi. A golden hand flew out from the top of his head. At first, it was only 10 feet in size, but suddenly, it grew to more than 300 feet. When it reached the top, it was even bigger than Quan He's body. He held Quan He's palm firmly and said, "Demon King Quan is quite strong, and his temper is quite big too." Seeing that their attack had failed, Quan and the Monster King were not surprised. With a loud shout, they flipped their palms and took out a hexagonal golden hammer from somewhere. They waved it and smashed it towards Zhang Yan's head. Zhang Yan circulated the Xian Huang giant palm and met the attack head-on. The might of the Xian Huang giant palm was too great. With a single strike, the Xian Huang giant palm crumbled apart, turning into a clump of yellow mist. Governor Yang and the others who were watching the battle from the watchtower exclaimed in shock. Quan He thought that he had found an opportunity. Although his body was huge, his movements were not slow. He only lifted the golden hammer a little before smashing it down with all his strength. Zhang Yan's expression did not change. He calmly took out a spell and a yellow true light rushed out from the top of his head and collided with the golden hammer. As soon as the two collided, there was a loud explosion. Zhang Yan's body couldn't help but sway, while Quan and the Demon King only felt a strong force coming from their hands. Even with his extraordinary strength, his wrist hurt from the rebound. His body leaned back and he took half a step back. Quan He and the demons behind him saw that their king seemed to be at a disadvantage and roared. Immediately, more than 10 demon generals leaped into the air and rushed over. They wanted to make things difficult for Zhang Yan. These demon cultivators were all wearing helmets and armors. They were armed with weapons and dressed like ordinary generals. Their cultivation was also not bad, all of them were in the core formation realm. If they were warriors, it would be hard for them to not be defeated under the siege of more than 10 peers, not to mention staying where they were. However, Zhang Yan's method was orthodox and his core formation was first grade. With the strength of his core evil, there were very few peers in Xian men who could be on par with him. Thus, he showed no fear and laughed, "You came at the right time." He scattered the water element true light and a watercolored light shot up into the sky. It was like a barrier in front of him. The two oncoming demon generals could not stop in time. They immediately fell in. The remaining demon generals were shocked. How could they not know how powerful it was? They immediately stopped and took out their divine weapons from tens of feet away. At this time, Quan He had already recovered his breath. He raised his hammer and swung it again. This time, it was a horizontal sweep. Suddenly, a muffled sound of breaking through the air erupted. Immediately, there was a muffled sound of the air breaking. Zhang Yan sneered. The golden hammer fell right on top of the brilliance, but his body only trembled slightly before stabilizing again. He was actually not injured in the slightest. He flicked his sleeves, and the aqua light rose again. The moment those divine weapons fell into the water, they were swept away by the water and disappeared without a trace. The demon generals panicked when they saw their weapons falling into the enemy's hands. They desperately tried to use their spells to take back their weapons. However, no matter how hard they tried, their faces turned red but they still could not get any response. Up until now, Zhang Yan had been sitting cross-legged. But at this moment, he slowly stood up and stood on top of the cloud. The yellow mist above his head retracted, and the golden hand reformed. He coldly said, "Since you've come, there's no need for you to leave. All of you can stay." Demon King Quan He saw that something was wrong and shouted, "Retreat." Just now, he was about to wave his golden hammer. However, Zhang Yan stomped his foot and the water element true light surged over. Quan He suddenly felt as if he was being pulled by a tide, as if he was going to be dragged in. He hurriedly stabilized his body and couldn't be bothered to take care of those demon generals. At the same time, Zhang Yan stretched out his hand. The yellow hand expanded to a few hundred feet. Like a cloud that covered the sky, it cast a large haze and grabbed the demon generals. The demon generals were caught off guard and were caught in the palm. Zhang Yan sneered. He used his mana and the 5 fingers of the hands suddenly closed. Only the sound of bones and flesh being crushed could be heard. No matter how strong their cultivation was, under such a grab, they were all tangled up inside and outside. They could no longer save their lives. Originally, these demon generals relied on the sturdiness of their bodies to dare to launch an attack. However, no matter how valiant they were, they couldn't help but be terrified when they saw such a miserable state. The gazes they shot at Zhang Yan were filled with terror, and they hesitated to move forward for a time. At this moment, besides the disciples of the Dark Azure sect, the spectators of the battle from afar were the disciples of numerous small sections. They saw that Zhang Yan was facing the encirclement of over 10 demon cultivators by himself, yet he beat all of them to the point they didn't have the ability to fight back at all. No matter how ferocious their attacks were, they were easily dealt with, and they didn't retreat in the slightest. One of them, a middle-aged cultivator, exclaimed in admiration, "This fellow Daoist Zhang is truly impressive." A fellow disciple that stood by his side puckered his lips and said as if it was a matter of course, "This fellow Zhang is ranked 9th amongst the top 10 disciples of Qinsang school, so he's naturally extraordinary. Not to mention this fellow Zhang has attained the first-grade core formation, and he's the only one in a few thousand years. He's truly surpassed us by too much, so it's not surprising that he possesses such ability." The middle-aged cultivator from before sighed. He usually thought highly of himself. Even though he'd heard of how formidable the top 10 disciples of Qinsang school were, he'd never experienced it for himself. So he'd always thought that even if they were superior to him, it wasn't difficult for him to catch up to them. But now that he'd experienced it for himself, he really couldn't be compared to them. These demon generals were practically defenseless in front of Zhang Yan, but if they fought him, it would take a lot of effort to take him down. If he had to fight 2 of them, he could only think of ways to kill one of them, and that was under the premise that they didn't have any treasures with them. Song Hong from Linqing Monastery had come with the crowd. He'd met Zhang Yan once before, and now that he saw the figure in front of him, his clothes fluttering in the wind, he couldn't help but sigh. He thought to himself, Qinsang school is indeed a great sect with 10,000 years of history, and its foundation is deep. If someone like senior brother Zhang is ranked 9th in the sect, I wonder how powerful the others who are ranked above him are. He subconsciously glanced at Han Siyi. When this woman attacked, it was like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. She'd made hundreds and thousands of small demons collapse to the ground. She was also very powerful. She was also very methodical. Up until now, all the movements of the Quanta tribe had been under her control. She was quite good at strategizing. But from what everyone could see, no matter how many times Han Siyi attacked, she was only dealing with small demons. Zhang Yan was fighting the Archfiend King and a group of demon generals by himself. Compared to him, Han Siyi's performance was a bit lacking. Huoxian had written a letter to the head of Linqing Monastery, saying that he could help the sect fight against the demons together. Song Hong, who was the head disciple of the sect, didn't agree to this, but now he had another idea. He thought to himself, "I'll have to discuss this with my master when I get back." Quan and the Archfiend King saw their people being killed by Zhang Yan, and they couldn't take it anymore. They roared and used their true power. He opened his mouth and spat out a bright light. A fist-sized, perfectly round, and flawless golden bead flew out and shot towards Zhang Yan. At such a close distance, the golden pearl arrived in practically an instant, and it smashed onto Zhang Yan's chest with a bang, causing the fine light on his clothes to shake violently and be on the verge of dispersing. Zhang Yan waved his hand and stopped the light, but he was slightly surprised. It has to be known that his treasured robe was a profound artifact. Even if it went up against a divine ability, it would still be able to block it. However, he didn't expect that with one attack from this magic treasure, it would almost shatter the treasure light. Although it wasn't enough to truly injure him, the opponent's item was already extremely powerful. Quan He was even more shocked in his heart. This was an innate magic treasure that he'd nurtured himself, and it possessed the ability to shatter metal. Every time he used it, its might would decrease by a level until it was completely useless. In the past, he'd never used it lightly, and he'd only utilized it because he had no other choice. He didn't expect that even this couldn't do anything to Zhang Yan. At this moment, he also realized that the other party had such a robe to protect him, and it was impossible for him to force him to retreat. Quan He said fiercely, "Fellow Taoist, I don't want to fall out with your Qinsang school. If you open the door today and let us go, then we can talk. Otherwise, I, Quan He, am not a pushover. Let's fight to the death today." Zhang Yan didn't care about such threats and said with a smile, "I need a spirit beast to guard the door. Is Archfiend King Quan willing to come?" Quan He stared at Zhang Yan with his red eyes. Behind him, more and more small demons fell under the illusionary cloud jade smoke. He couldn't help but feel a little impatient. He shouted, "Fight," and spat out an ink-like qi. As soon as the qi came out, it caused a whirlpool and a boundless black wind. Countless fine grains of sand danced back and forth in the wind. This wind was extremely strange. The originally clear sky was immediately obscured, and the sun and moon lost their light. Not only did the spectators standing at the back feel their minds go blank with just a glance, they became muddle-headed. There were a few people with low cultivation who, if not for their fellow sect members holding them back, would have fallen off the clouds. The wind was a breath of foul qi that Quan He cultivated by borrowing the yin qi from the ground. Once it was used, it could confuse the mind and soul. Quan He hid himself in the wind and retracted his tall figure. He stretched out his hand and grabbed 100 or so clansmen with decent cultivation base. Without saying a word, he fled outside. Seeing that there was no way for him to kill his way out of Zhang Yan, he first put on a show and then released the bewildering wind. He didn't hope to injure the enemy, but only hoped to delay him for a while. With the help of the bewildering wind, he could use it to conceal himself and then quietly escape. Han Sui frowned. She pressed on the armrest and said, "How can this demon use demonic arts? There must be a reason behind it." If it was 3 years ago, Zhang Yan wouldn't have many ways to deal with the black wind. But now, it wasn't a problem for him. He pointed with his hand and a bolt of lightning appeared. The purple light flew out and made a series of thunderclaps. The black mist was forcefully swept away. He turned around and just happened to see Quan He's figure leaving. He suddenly shouted, "Quan He, you've lost today. Quickly put down your weapon and surrender." He had already used some strength in his shout. Quan He, who was the first to receive the attack, immediately felt dizzy and his body trembled. Zhang Yan took out the incantation gesture, and as he moved his Xian Qi, he raised a long yellow light and pressed down on the other party's body. Casting recommendation votes, monthly votes, etc. Chapter 411. At this moment, Demon King Quan was not in the mood to continue fighting and did not want to be entangled with the ground. Therefore, he did not dodge Zhang Yan's true light. In his heart, he planned to take it head-on and buy some time to escape with his men. His original plan was not bad. He was a cultivator of the strength path. Even if he suffered some injuries, he did not care. However, when the true light came down, he was shocked. His back sank and his body became shorter. It was as if he was carrying a mountain on his back. Under the pressure of this huge force, he felt disgust in his chest and a fishy smell entered his throat. He was about to fall from the sky. He knew that he could not resist this force. At this moment, he did not care about escaping. He quickly let out a roar and grew his body again. His feet stepped on the ground and arched upwards. His courage and blood surged up. He wanted to use his strength to push the true light away. He did not believe that even if there was a mountain behind him, he would use all his strength to push it away. Zhang Yan saw that he was not willing to surrender and smiled. He was not in a hurry to take him down. As long as he was suppressed by his true light, he would not be able to easily struggle out unless his opponent's cultivation realm was higher than his. He lightly activated his Dan Sha and calmly activated his Xian Qi. He continuously created true light of the earth element, one after another, and pressed down on Quan He. The brilliance was originally a faint yellow light. However, as more and more true force was accumulated, it gradually turned into a dark yellow color. It was like the accumulation of rocks and stones, and the mountains were stacked on top of each other. Under his true light of the earth element, even Sui Hong was defeated in the past. Moreover, his cultivation level was much higher than before. No matter how Quan He struggled, he could not get rid of the mountain on top of him. Under his pressure, Quan He's body became lower and lower. After a while, his knees bent, his body leaned forward, and both his hands were on the ground. He was the Demon King. Although his body was being pressed down, he raised his head to the sky. The veins on his forehead were bulging and his expression was ferocious. He kept roaring like a trapped beast and refused to lower his head. At this moment, Zhang Yan's expression was calm, without a trace of anger. The demeanor of a Taoist master formed a stark contrast with the Demon King's hoarse appearance. With Zhang Yan blocking the front, Han Sui easily took down the monster cultivators in the rear. Even those small demons that had fled after seeing that the situation was not good were driven back one by the formation flags. Han Sui sent her disciples out to capture the monsters that had some cultivation and bind them up. She didn't bother with the lesser monsters that hadn't transformed. She left them to her disciples to deal with. Usually, these disciples envied their masters and fellow disciples for having monsters guarding their immortals' cave and ordering them around. Although the cultivation of these little demons was a little weak, it was exactly what they wanted. As for the rest, he casually killed them. Even the cultivators from the small sects who were watching the battle acted together. In less than an hour, the entire spring diagram demon division had vanished into thin air, no longer existing. At this time, under the true earth light, Quan He's entire body was emitting creaking sounds. It seemed like he couldn't take it anymore. At this moment, he wasn't trying to escape, but to struggle for his life. He knew very well that the force on his back was unimaginable. If he let his guard down, he could be crushed into a pile of minced meat. He grumbled in his heart. If this continued, he would only be waiting for death. He rolled his eyes and shouted, "Taoist, please, please let go. I'm willing to be the spirit beast guarding the immortals' cave." Zhang Yan heard that although his words were intermittent, as if they were being choked out from his throat, he could tell that the demons still had some strength. Moreover, his words were said unwillingly. It was clear that he didn't want to give up and was still trying to escape. He sneered, "Although Demon King Quan has such intentions, you are a demon lord after all. Your wild nature is hard to tame. You need to be taught a lesson before I can accept you." Quan He saw that Zhang Yan wasn't going to let go, so he had no choice but to grit his teeth and keep quiet. After holding on for a while, he squeezed out the last bit of strength in his body. Sweat poured down like rain, his face turned from red to white, and his body trembled violently. Just as he was about to die under the true light, a jade smoke flew over from afar. When it was near, the smoke dispersed and Han Sui's elegant figure was revealed. She turned her hand and retracted the auspicious smoke around her. She called out softly, "Junior brother Zhang, spare him." Zhang Yan looked back and smiled, "Senior sister Han, why are you pleading for this demon?" Han Sui bowed to Zhang Yan and said sternly, "This demon used a demonic technique just now. This is a little strange. I see that junior brother Zhang is still holding back. Why don't we capture him first and hand him over to senior brother Hua?" Zhang Yan didn't mind. Seeing that Quan He had no more strength left, he waved his sleeve and retracted the true light. He said loudly, "Since senior sister Han has spoken, I will spare this demon's life for now." Quan He was already at the end of his rope, so when the true light disappeared, he collapsed on the ground, panting. Han Sui's expression didn't change, but she was secretly shocked. Junior brother Zhang's Dao technique is very strange. I wonder where he learned it from. She thought about it for a while before letting it go. It was not rare for the disciples of the Taoist sect to obtain a few mysterious Taoist techniques when they were traveling outside. For example, there were more than 10,000 cultivators in the Yutzang sect, but for those who could become the top 10 disciples, how could they be lacking in opportunities? Zhang Yan looked up and saw that there was not a single demon standing in his field of vision. He pondered for a moment and said, "Senior Sister Han, although the Quanta division has been eliminated, there are still 2 divisions heading east and west. If we chase them back and forth, it will delay our journey. Why don't we split up? It would be best if we can take them down before they attack the city." Han Sui thought for a while and felt that it was a good idea, so she nodded and said, "Junior brother Zhang is right. Let's split up. I heard that Yi Jie tribe is slightly stronger than the other 2. Junior brother, you should do more work, so I'll leave this tribe to you. What do you think?" Zhang Yan didn't mind. Even if Han Sui didn't come, with his absolute space sword, he could take care of Quanta tribe. It would just take a little more effort. Dealing with Yi Jie tribe, which was weaker than him, was a piece of cake. He nodded and said, "That's good." He waved his sleeves and retracted the water element true light. In the blink of an eye, he floated to the top of the city wall and said to the subordinate, "Jiang Zheng, I still lack a few people in this flying palace. Follow me." Jiang Zheng's heart was in turmoil. He knelt down and said happily, "Disciple obeys master's order." Zhang Yan waved his hand, and an irresistible force pulled him up. He rose into the sky and took him to the flying palace. Han Sui's ribbon twirled around her, and she turned into smoke. Then she disappeared. Governor Yang and his subordinates saw them leave. They all knelt on the ground and thanked them for their kindness. Yang Taisho suddenly thought of something. He didn't care about kneeling and hurriedly shouted, "Immortal Elder, please tell me your name." He called a few times, but there was no reply. He was disappointed. An advisor squeezed through the crowd and came to the front. He said, "Sir, don't worry. I know the Immortal Elder's name." Yang Taisho tilted his head and saw that the aide was the one who suggested the drowning plan, but at this moment, he had no time to ask how this person escaped from the bindings. He asked curiously, "How did you know? Could it be that you know this immortal?" The advisor immediately said, "No, I just saw this Immortal Elder talking to the female immortal. Although I don't know what the 2 immortal elders were talking about, I have good eyesight and am good at reading lips. If I'm not wrong, this Taoist elder should be surnamed Zhang." He said it modestly, but his words were full of confidence. Yang Taisho thought about it carefully and felt that it was indeed very likely. But on the surface, he shook his head repeatedly and sighed. How can such guesses be counted? This is a serious matter. If I write the wrong name and annoy the Immortal Elder, it won't be good. Forget it. The aide instantly became anxious, and he suddenly stepped forward and grabbed Governor Yang's sleeve as he said in a sonorous voice, "My lord, this lowly official is willing to use my life to guarantee that this judgment is absolutely correct." Governor Yang laughed and said, "Mr. Chiu, I believe you." The advisor immediately came back to his senses. The governor was afraid that he wouldn't be able to bear the responsibility, so he played a trick and asked him to take the lead. However, he didn't really care. As long as the governor approved of him, it was fine. He chuckled and retreated to the side. After Zhang Yan and Han Sui left Weeping Province, they sent their flying palaces to search for the other 2 monster tribes. Those 2 tribes weren't as strong as Quanta tribe, and with the 2 of them working together, they were wiped out in less than half a day. After wiping out the 3 tribes, they didn't stay outside and returned to the mountain to report. Han Sui and Zhang Yan parted ways at Clear Nether Lake and went to 10 Peaks Mountain to see Huxian. Huxian ordered a maid to bring her in. After she sat down, he slowly said, "Junior apprentice sister, you've worked hard." Han Sui bowed and said, "I'm willing to work for senior apprentice brother. It's not hard." Huxian's expression couldn't help but change slightly when he saw her bitter expression, and he couldn't help but want to say something. But he didn't say anything in the end, and he changed the topic. "Junior sister, May I know which realm junior brother Zhang has cultivated to? Hearing that, Han Si's face looked disappointed. After all, she was a disciple of the celestial sect of wonders. After slightly organizing her emotions, her heart was as calm as still water, and she returned to her previous cold appearance. She continued, according to what senior brother said earlier, junior brother Zhang has only practiced the divine lightning of violet sky for 3 years. However, from the side today, I can see that junior brother Zhang has already achieved small success in this divine ability. With this kind of cultivation aptitude, not to mention that I can't compare to him, even compared to eldest senior brother from back then, he isn't much inferior. Hu Xian was silent for a while, then sighed, that's all there is to a genius. Han Si shook her head and said, junior apprentice brother Zhang is not bad, but he is still a master and a disciple. You value him more than you value a disciple of an aristocratic family. I heard a few elders in the family talk about you. Hu Xian didn't seem to care. He waved his hand and sneered, let them say what they want. How can these short-sighted people know what I'm planning? Chapter 412. Han Si stayed in Ten Peaks Mountain for a long time. He discussed some matters with Hu Xian. Before he left, he reported his experience of wiping out the demon clan in detail. Hu Xian immediately became vigilant when he heard that Demon King Quan He knew how to use a demonic technique. He felt that something was amiss. He couldn't help but wonder, could it be that the devil's doctrine is behind these 3 demonic tribes that are wreaking havoc in Donghua? If the demon clan of the North Dark Star continent and the disciples of the demonic sect were working together, it would be bad news for Qinsang School. It might even disrupt his original plan. Thinking of this, he could not help but look solemn. To be cautious, he brought Demon King Quan He over for questioning. Quan He and the Demon King had lost a lot of their sharpness after fighting with Zhang Yan previously. At this moment, they were in the Yinsang sect, their cultivation was suppressed by the talisman seal, and they were facing a nascent soul Taoist master alone. How could they dare to put on airs as a demon king? Hearing Hu Xian's question, she immediately replied respectfully and honestly, reporting to spiritual master Hua, this little demon doesn't know where this cultivation method came from. It's just that when I woke up one day, this cultivation method was left in my mind, as if I was born with it. Hu Xian frowned slightly. Based on what this demon said, this seemed to be the devil sect's dream invasion technique. However, this technique was an evil technique, and it was only executed to injure the essence, qi, and soul of the target. Moreover, the target wasn't completely unharmed, so it was rare to pass down a technique like this. Thus, Hu Xian asked, after you obtained this technique, did you cultivate with ease? Quan He shook his head, not so. I was very careful at first, afraid that I would fall into someone else's trap. But because I saw that it was a shocking technique, and that it didn't require any external help, I couldn't help but practice it. After that, I didn't have any abnormalities. This technique could only be used to confuse the enemy and escape. It was fine against people with low cultivation, but it was useless against Zhang Yan. Hu Xian could tell that he wasn't lying, so he asked a few more times, but he couldn't get anything useful out of him. He didn't want to spend too much time on an evil king. He was about to dispose of it when Han Si said, junior brother Zhang said he would take this evil king as his guardian spirit beast. Senior brother Hua, why don't you give it to him? Hu Xian thought for a moment before his expression eased up, and he said calmly, all right, then I'll have to trouble junior sister to go. Han Si rose to her feet. She said softly, senior brother, this little sister will take her leave. Hu Xian nodded silently. Han Si waved at Quan He, and a wisp of smoke flew out to pick him up. Then, he turned into a breeze and flew away. Quan He had no idea that he had just walked on the edge of life and death. He had no choice but to follow Han Si obediently. Hu Xian waved his hand lightly and wiped away the faint fragrance in the cave with a calm expression. Then, he closed the cave door and went into meditation. At the same time, in the clear nether lake, Jiang Zheng kowtowed 3 times to Zhang Yan, officially completing the ceremony of becoming his disciple. Zhang Yan smiled, "Disciple, you may rise." When Jiang Zheng stood up, he couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. It had been 30 years, and he thought he wouldn't be able to see his teacher again. He didn't expect that he would finally be accepted into the school. Thinking about it, it was all because of the kindness in his heart. If Zhang Yan hadn't saved him from the flood, he wouldn't be the Jiang Zheng he was today. If he hadn't come all the way to Chuizhou to stop the demons for the people, he wouldn't have been able to join the school. He thought to himself, if I succeed in my cultivation, I'll have to do more good deeds. Zhang Yan looked at him and said, "Jiang Zheng, you are now a disciple in name. Now that you've entered my sect, you can be considered an in-name disciple. The sect doesn't restrict you from staying or leaving. Besides the clear nether heavenly lake, I have many spirit islands and wondrous peaks here. If you want, you can choose one of them to establish your own abode." Jiang Zheng looked up and said, "Disciple is willing to listen to teacher's teachings." Zhang Yan smiled, "That's up to you. I'll teach you a technique, and you can comprehend it on your own. I'll also give you a talisman to protect yourself." With a wave of his sleeve, spiritual light suddenly appeared and 3 items flew out. One was a sleeve pouch, the second was a horsetail whisk, and the third was a talisman. Each of them emitted a brilliant light and an oppressive spiritual energy as they floated in the air. Jiang Zheng went up to receive them and knelt to thank him again. Zhang Yan counted the days. He had to cultivate the wood elemental true light in seclusion, so he probably wouldn't be able to take care of his disciple. After thinking for a while, a baleful aura rose in him. He took out some of the 4 monarchs' water, Chiganoderma, and clear stone milk left over from the last time and wrapped them in spiritual light. He pointed them to Jiang Zheng and said, "Send these 3 herbs to Lady Luo. I'll be going into seclusion in a few days. If you don't understand anything in your cultivation, you can ask her." Jiang Zheng had been traveling among the mortals all these years, so he immediately understood. Teacher wanted to use him to do a favor and take care of him, so he answered, "Yes, teacher." Zhang Yan waved his sleeve lightly and said, "Go." Jiang Zheng knelt down and bowed before leaving the main hall. The moment he went out, he thought of the many halls and paths here. He had just arrived, so he didn't know where he should stay. He wasn't in a hurry, and he walked forward slowly with steady steps. He looked at the scenery around him, and he couldn't help but exclaim in admiration at the beautiful scenery. Unknowingly, he arrived at the corner of the palace. At this moment, he saw a girl in red with a sweet face and bright eyes walking toward him. He didn't know where she came from, but from her appearance, she didn't look like an ordinary servant girl. Thus, he didn't dare to act rashly and avoided her. Wang Keting came here today to ask Zhang Yan about the difficulties in cultivation, but she suddenly saw an unfamiliar young Taoist standing at the side. She couldn't help but stare at him with her beautiful eyes and said, "Hey, who are you? Why haven't I seen you before?" Jiang Zheng hurriedly bowed and said, "I'm Jiang Zheng, teacher Zheng's newly accepted disciple." Wang Keting had a look of realization. She then looked at him curiously and said, "So your teacher's newly accepted little junior brother." In terms of age, Jiang Zheng was close to 50 years old. Suddenly being called little junior brother by a cute and lively girl, a strange feeling arose in his heart. However, he quickly adjusted himself. He thought to himself, how can a cultivator's age be judged by appearance? Maybe this girl's age is far above his, so he said respectfully, "Yes, junior brother is new in the sect and doesn't know the rules. I don't know my fellow disciples. May I know how to address this senior sister?" Wang Keting giggled and said, "Listen well, my surname is Wang, and I'm the youngest in the sect. Since you're here, you should call me 4th senior sister." Jiang Zheng thought to himself, so teacher has 4 disciples. Although he saw that this senior sister Wang's cultivation was lower than his, he had trained in the mortal world for a long time, so he was very humble and tactful. He didn't look down on her at all, and he didn't lack etiquette on his face. He bowed and said, so it's fourth senior sister, this little brother greets you. Wang Kating responded with a sound of joy. She had previously heard from the maidservants that her teacher had brought back another disciple. She was curious and wanted to find some time to see what he looked like and whether he would be fun. She didn't expect to meet him here. Although it didn't seem like what she had imagined, when they talked, she found a trace of the feeling of being a senior sister. She waved her hand and happily said, "Junior brother is too polite. In the future, when you're cultivating in the mansion, if there's anything you don't understand, you can ask your senior sister." Jiang Zheng saw that she was a person without any schemes. He smiled and said, "Yes, if I have any questions, I will definitely come and ask. I hope senior sister doesn't mind." Wang Kating was even happier. She was also very depressed in the house. Wang Kaiwei and Tian Kun only cared about cultivation and never chatted with her. Now that she saw Jiang Zheng, she didn't let him go. Instead, she dragged him and said, "Come, junior brother, you and senior sister talk about the mortal world." Pick the fun stuff to talk about. She had never been to Qinsang school before and had only heard about it from the elders, so she was naturally curious. Jiang Zheng could not refuse and could only choose some novel things to talk about. Fortunately, he was indeed experienced and knowledgeable. Moreover, with his cultivation base, he was not afraid of ferocious beasts and poisonous insects. He had been to many remote mountains and ancient forests. Listening to Wang Kating with great interest, he forgot his original intention of coming here. She had condensed a xian seed in the past few days and was only one step away from the mystic light realm. However, she couldn't take that step no matter what. She couldn't help but become impatient. However, the more impatient she was, the more she couldn't pass. Feeling dejected, she came to ask Zhang Yan for help. However, after listening to Jiang Zheng's interesting stories, she felt happy and lively. The frustration that had been bothering her for the past few days was swept away and she returned to her natural nature. Suddenly, the meridians in her body smoothed out, as if some shackles had been broken. At this instant, a beam of light shot through the obstacles and appeared above her head. It was a bright red ball in the shape of Xing Ruoji, which hung above her head. Jiang Zheng couldn't help but be surprised. After pausing for a while, he clasped his hands and said sincerely, "Congratulations, fourth senior sister." He had only broken through to the mystic light realm in the past few years, and because he didn't have a teacher to guide him, he had put in a lot of hard work. He didn't think that this senior sister would be able to break through just by saying a few words to him. It would be a lie if he didn't say that he was envious, and the joy of joining the sect faded a little. He made up his mind and said, "Everyone under teacher's tutelage must be like this. It won't be easy for me to have a place here. From today onwards, I'll have to catch up." Wang Kating had only used 3 years or so to break through to the mystic light realm. One reason was because her talent was good, and her foundation was stable. She had used around 10 years to condense her yuan qi. The other reason was that the cultivation technique that Zhang Yan had chosen for her was the one that had been chosen from more than 100 books. It was the most suitable for her, and it was a cultivation technique that allowed her to progress extremely quickly. Adding on the fact that she had the help of the clear dark heavenly lake, the spirit qi here was not something that the caves outside could compare to. Wang Kating was overjoyed for a good while when the difficulty that had plagued her for so many days was actually easily resolved. When she came to her senses, she realized that she'd left Jiang Zheng out in the cold, and she instantly felt slightly embarrassed. Her beautiful eyes turned as she withdrew an object from her pouch and stuffed it into Jiang Zheng's hand. She said, "Junior brother, this is a greeting gift from senior sister." Jiang Zheng rejected it slightly before accepting it. However, before he could see what it was, Wang Kating pulled his sleeve and said, come with me." Jiang Zheng paused and asked, "Go where?" Wang Kating blinked and smiled. "Junior martial brother, you have a senior martial sister and a senior martial brother. How can I be the only one to come out? They should have a part as well." Chapter 413. Zhang Yan had the help of the mirror spirit of the little teapot, so he only needed to communicate with it and he would know what everyone was doing inside the cave. This was why he knew immediately when Wang Keting broke through to the mystic light realm outside the cave. Of the Wang sisters, Wang Keting's talent was the best. She was even better than her older sister, Wang Kaiwei, so it wasn't strange for her to reach the mystic light realm first. However, this was also due to the cultivation method, and it also varied from person to person. It wasn't that the faster one cultivated, the better it was. For example, Tian Kun might have started cultivating earlier than the Wang sisters, but he was still at the clear Qi realm and couldn't break through. However, his cultivation method was made by Guo Zongyao for his reincarnated body. He might be a step behind now, but Zhang Yan dared to say that he would be stronger than the Wang sisters in the future. The mirror spirit flattered on the side, thanks to the master who borrowed the demon general to practice with them a few days ago. They have been practicing hard these days. Even little Miss Wang's restless temperament has been restrained a little, and she has become much more diligent. Zhang Yan smiled faintly. It wasn't strange for his disciples to have such a reaction. The reason the Yao general was imprisoned as a slave was because his cultivation wasn't as strong as him. Now that the demon calamity was coming, if one's cultivation wasn't as strong as others, they would be at the mercy of the enemy. His disciples were smart. Even if they didn't think of it before, they would be able to think of it after they returned. Other than those who couldn't be helped, no one wanted to end up like this. If they didn't want to end up like this, they would have to work even harder at cultivating. Right at this moment, the mirror spirit's expression changed and she said in a low voice, "Master, Han Sui is outside the palace and wants to see you." Zhang Yan said, "Oh." He wasn't surprised. He lowered his head and thought for a moment before standing up, "I will go out to greet him." He opened the formation door and stepped out. He arrived above the heavenly lake and saw Han Sui standing in the pavilion where the two of them had met before. Next to her was the dejected Yao King Quan He. In his heart, he had already guessed the purpose of her visit. Stepping forward, he cupped his fists and said with a smile, "I didn't know that senior martial sister would be here. I apologize for not going out to meet you. Please come in and have a seat." Han Sui returned the greeting and said, "Junior brother Zhang, I won't be going in. I heard that you wanted to take this archfiend king as a guardian spirit beast. I asked senior martial brother Hua for a favor, so I came to deliver this demon to your residence." Previously, Zhang Yan had only said it casually and didn't really want to use Quan He as a spirit beast to guard the mansion. However, this person was much better than the demon general from before, so he expressed his thanks. "Senior martial sister Han is considerate. My humble residence is simple and crude, but the scenery is not bad. Since senior martial sister is here, why don't you take a seat first? I, your junior martial brother, can entertain you." Han Sui shook his head. "This time, I've been out for a while after the extermination of the demon division. I've missed a lot of homework. I'll be returning to the residence to cultivate." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Then I won't hold you up anymore. Guards." Following his voice, two maids immediately stood up. "Master, what orders do you have?" Zhang Yan pointed in the direction of the heavenly lake and said, "Go get the dew from the heavenly lake and give it to senior martial sister Han." The maids obeyed and left. Not long after, one of them came out with a jade pot and gave it to Han Sui. Han Sui had personally tasted the dew before, and it was refreshing. It suited her taste, so she hesitated for a while and took it. She smiled and said, "Since it's junior martial brother Zhang's kind intentions, I'll accept it. Goodbye." Zhang Yan smiled and cupped his hands. "Farewell, senior martial sister." Han Sui curtsied and stepped on a cloud. He looked up into the sky and disappeared into the horizon. Zhang Yan watched her leave, then waved his sleeve and took the archfiend King Quan He in. He turned around and went back to the residence. In the main hall, he threw Quan He on the ground and said to the mirror spirit, "Zhang Jing, trap the archfiend king in the formation. Don't let him escape." The mirror spirit immediately agreed and pointed with her finger. The formation moved and the Archfiend King disappeared. The entire cave here was opened by the true weapon of the small kettle realm. The mirror spirit could move the things in it at will. Even if there were external enemies who broke into this place, as long as they were not Taoist Dongtian, they could still find a way to trap them. Seeing that the residence was safe, Zhang Yan waved the mirror spirit away and returned to the small kettle mirror bamboo building. He closed his eyes and continued to cultivate the wood elemental true light. After Quan He was trapped in the formation, the mirror spirit was afraid that he wouldn't be able to cultivate and starve to death, so she lifted the seal. Because he was originally a Archfiend King, he didn't know what to do, so he added a Cloud Sun gold lock and left. Just like that, Quan He stayed there for several months. Besides a maidservant bringing him food every 30 days, no one paid any attention to him. He was originally a Archfiend King, commanding tens of thousands of demons, but he fell into such a situation today. One could imagine the anger in his heart. Although this place was full of spiritual energy, every time he remembered his past glory, he lost the interest to cultivate. He was drowsy all day and became listless. After another month or so, his body suddenly trembled and he suddenly opened his eyes. Then, from the shoulder, another head slowly drilled out, while the other head was still sleeping soundly. He looked around, and there was a hint of slyness and fierceness in his eyes. He turned to look at the chains on his body and said to himself, it turns out that he was imprisoned. No wonder there was no movement in the past few months. Even his cultivation didn't increase but fell, allowing me to get him easily. He took another deep breath and said in shock, this time the spiritual energy is so rich that even my cave residence is far from comparable. Could it be the cave residence of Taoist Grotto Heaven? When he thought of this, he was also shocked. He looked around cautiously, and without hesitation, he executed a spell and released dozens of spells. They floated around the cave residence. His spell was a magical technique of the Jiling sect. It was invisible and traceless, and it could turn into a trace of qi to explore the way. It was extremely sensitive to the aura of cultivators. As long as the other party's cultivation was lower than his, he would be able to find out more or less. Because the spiritual energy here was different from other places, it should be a cave residence. Therefore, he guessed that this was where Taoist Elephant Xiang cultivated. Even though the spell couldn't be detected by other cultivators, he still acted carefully. He probed carefully with every step, afraid that something might go wrong. However, after searching for half a day, he found out that other than the 12th cave mansion, there was a place he couldn't see through. The highest cultivation level of the other cultivators in the mansion was only the 3rd level of the core transformation realm, which was lower than his cultivation level. Even at this stage, he was still very cautious. He thought to himself, the place that he couldn't detect might be the place where the prefecture master cultivated. However, it wasn't that he didn't gain anything from this investigation. He thought to himself, that female demon cultivating in the northeast corner is about to break through the shackles and enter the Yuanying stage. This is a good opportunity. Once she succeeds, and this is where she cultivates, she will definitely be overjoyed and will be defenseless. If I can sneak a spell into her when she is in a state of mind and slowly burn it, I can find a way to arouse the desires in her heart and control her. Then, I will have a great help and won't lose to my senior brother. This technique of his was called the Heart Demon Attracting Spell. As long as there was a flaw in the cultivator's heart or emotions, he would be able to sneak into the cultivator's body. From time to time, he would arouse the greed in the cultivator's heart. When the cultivator completely obeyed his will, he would become a puppet controlled by him. The deeper he sank, the more he would be unable to extricate himself. And the amazing thing about this technique was that the person who was under the spell wouldn't lose his own consciousness. He would only think that everything he did was his own will and wouldn't think that it was someone else playing tricks on him. He would wholeheartedly complete the instructions he gave him. This technique was one of the secret techniques of the demon sect and was even more brilliant than the original technique of Jiling sect. However, in the past thousands of years, it was only recorded in jade scrolls and no one was able to cultivate it. If it wasn't for the arrival of the demon calamity which caused the demon cave to be filled with spiritual energy and the appearance of many demons that had never existed before, it would have been impossible to cultivate it. Previously, the reason why Quan He Demon King's concubine fell in love with a lowly slave for no reason and gave birth to a child was because of him. He purposely stirred up the feelings of love between the two of them, which resulted in this ill-fated relationship. After that, Quan He's rage gave him the opportunity to enter the demon's heart. The technique that Quan He was taught in his dream wasn't a technique to confuse the enemy. It was a seed that could be used by the old demon to execute his demon technique and draw out the demon's soul. However, the old demon had laid down hundreds of curses on different cultivators. Their cultivations were also different. Therefore, he didn't keep an eye on Quan He all day and night. Usually, he would lie dormant and wait for the right time. It was only when his mind turned and just now that he made a move. Today, he felt that Quan He's willpower was low and his guard was unprecedentedly low. Therefore, he took advantage of the situation and easily turned the tables on him with just a turn of the curse. The old demon probed for a while more before retracting all the curses. Although he wanted to take over the female demon that he found and use it for himself, he thought about it and said, "I don't know much about the situation here. I shouldn't act rashly." Up until now, he still couldn't determine the cultivation level of the master of this mansion. If he really was someone from the heavenly abode, then the slightest movement would be noticed by the master. However, if the master wasn't in the mansion, or if he wasn't the heavenly abode, then he couldn't miss this opportunity. After thinking about it, he felt that the only way was to completely take over this body and devour its soul. Then, he would be able to seize part of its memories and learn about the situation of this mansion. However, this body would be useless to him in the future. However, with the temptation in front of him, he was willing to gamble. The old demon secretly activated his technique and instantly took over Quan He's body. After reading through most of the memories, he couldn't help but say to himself, "So that's how it is. This stupid wolf was caught by someone. This is good." Although the master, Zhang Yan, is not simple and must be a disciple of one of the heavenly abode's people, he is only a core formation cultivator. If I make a move, he won't be able to find out. The old demon was an expert in formations. Therefore, when there was no one controlling the formation, it wouldn't be difficult for him to leave if he wanted to. As for the Cloud Sun Gold Lock, he also had a way to unlock it. However, just now, when he was about to make a move, he suddenly thought of something and thought, "Wait, the boy that brought me here is very similar to the true spirit of the magic treasure. He can control the core of the formation, so he must be inextricably linked to this formation. So dangerous, so dangerous. It's fine for me to be in this formation, but if I go out, I can hide from others, but I can't hide from the true spirit. If I startle him, then all my efforts will be wasted." Chapter 4:14. The old demon thought about it a few times and slowly calmed down. In the end, he decided not to act rashly for the time being. His heart-leading demon curse had not been trained to the highest level. When he cast it, he still needed to be within 100 feet of the person he chose. Just now, it could have a miraculous effect. Now that he was trapped here, if he did not bind it, he would definitely be useless. However, the current identity of this body was just a prisoner in this cave. Under the watch of the cave's true spirit, not to mention getting close to the female demon, even taking a few steps would definitely cause her to be vigilant. If he wanted to get close and cast a spell, it would be the same as breaking out of the cave, so he had to think of another way. Just as he was thinking about it, Lu Mainyang, who was cultivating in the cave abode, seemed to have sensed something and suddenly felt that something was wrong. She remembered what spiritual master Tao had said in the past and immediately stopped cultivating, turning to look for what was wrong. But after she restrained her cultivation and carefully organized her qi, she did not find anything strange. She could not help but think, Strange, just now I feel a wave of palpitation, like a fierce beast or a poisonous snake is spying on me. But now that I search, I find nothing. Could it really be the heart demon that Taoist master talked about? In the past, after Zhang Yan returned to Qinsang school, she still stayed in the Clear Feather sect to listen to Tao Xinren's lecture. From him, she found out that when she broke into the Yuanying realm, there would definitely be a small tribulation. It was just that she did not know the specifics, so he gave her a special technique. He said that if she could follow his instructions and patiently cultivate this technique, she would definitely be fine. After a cultivator condensed their Fa Li True seal and reached the third level of core transformation, they needed to absorb a large amount of evil energy and the essence of heaven and earth to nurture the golden core and accumulate the power to break through. The Xian sect called this sleeping yin using storage. Lu Meinyang's lifespan was approaching its end. If she still stayed on the deserted island to cultivate, she would most likely die of old age there. So she had to find a place full of spiritual energy and slowly pass this obstacle. After coming to the clear nether lake, her cultivation could be said to have improved by leaps and bounds, far better than before. He thought back to this place within the clear nether heavenly lake. With the obstruction of the formation, even if a great enemy came to attack, he would be able to detect it in time, so he could put this cultivation technique to the back of his mind. However, at this moment, she suddenly recalled this matter. Thinking that what Tao Xinren said would certainly not be without a target, she did not dare to take it lightly. After pondering for a long time, she took out a jade slip from the fragrance bag. With a wave of his hand, he undid the restrictions on it. With a shake of his hand, an illusory image appeared, and on it were dozens of heart sutras. She read through it carefully and focused her mind. He began to practice. Her cultivation wasn't shallow to begin with, so as soon as she activated her cultivation technique, her aura immediately changed, converging and gathering. The old devil was afraid that he would miss this opportunity. However, this time, he couldn't detect Lu Meinyang's whereabouts like before. He couldn't help but wonder, why can't I detect that demon's aura anymore? Could it be that she has left the residence? Fortunately, his attainments in demonic arts were extraordinary. After looking closely, just now, he could detect that faint aura. However, he wasn't happy, instead, he was shocked. He didn't know what kind of cultivation technique she used, but it actually repelled his curse. With the protection of this technique, it was no longer possible for him to plant the heart demon curse and take over the body like he did before. He sighed in regret. He thought that his luck was bad. Should he settle for the next best thing, to plant a curse on the disciples in the cave and then try to get close to that demon? Just now, after thinking of this idea, he shook his head and immediately rejected it. It wasn't that this method didn't work, but it required a long period of patience and better luck. If the other party didn't bother with him for a few months, wouldn't he have waited for nothing? Maybe at that time, that demon cultivator would have already broken into the Yuanying realm and he wouldn't be able to do anything. He was an elder of the demon sect and didn't have so much time to waste here. Now that the spiritual energy in the demon cave had almost rushed out of the earth realm, there were countless demons. In the past, obstacles that could block him for tens or even hundreds of years could be crossed with a single step. The problems that he had thought about in the past but couldn't find the right path were solved. Most of the disciples of the demon sect were cultivating so that they would be able to do well in the future when they fought against the celestial sect. For him, he cultivated 7 to 8 types of demonic arts at the same time. How could he be willing to stay here? He thought about it carefully. Since this path couldn't be taken, then he might as well try the most convenient and energy-saving path. He chuckled softly and tidied his robes. Standing up, he spoke out loudly, Zhouling Sect's elder Kai Dian wishes to meet with the manor master. His voice rumbled and instantly spread out. Zhang Yan was cultivating wood elemental true light in the cave abode and hadn't moved for half a year. Hearing this, he was immediately alarmed. His eyes suddenly opened, and an intimidating light flashed in his eyes. He opened the small pot mirror and took a look. After pondering for a while, his expression relaxed and he said in a deep voice, "Since a guest has arrived, please come in and see me." Kai Dian heard this and laughed loudly. Using some unknown method, he got rid of the cloud sun golden lock and stood up slowly. He found the array door and after a few turns, he walked into the main hall. Zhang Yan looked at the way he passed through the array and couldn't help but frown. Even though the mirror spirit was taken care of by him and didn't obstruct him, the fact that the other party found the core of the array so easily made him want to perfect the array again. Actually, the array was different for each person. If Guo Songyao was here to preside over the array, it wouldn't matter if it was a little rough. Even spiritual master Dong Tian couldn't do anything about it. However, Zhang Yan's cultivation was far from this elephant demon and couldn't fully use the power of the small pot mirror, so there were more loopholes in the array. Although Kai Dian still looked like Quan He, when he walked, he had his own style. Although he also walked with his head held high and looked mighty, it was obvious that he was a person in charge of an area, but the temperament he revealed was different from that of the Demon King. After arriving at the main hall, he acted like he was really a guest. He bowed to Zhang Yan and sat down casually. He shook his sleeves and raised his head to smile at Zhang Yan, saying, "Thank you for your hospitality, manor head." Zhang Yan bowed back and looked at him up and down, saying, "Fellow Taoist Kai, how is that Quan He?" Kai Dian stretched out his sleeves and said lightly, "His spirit is gone and no longer exists. From now on, there is no such person in this world." Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows and said, "This fellow Taoist Kai can hide in a cultivator's body, change the spirit, and make others unable to detect it. The cultivation method of the demon sect is indeed mysterious and exquisite, mysterious and unpredictable." Kai Dian smiled and said, "Not at all. It's just a small matter. How can it enter the eyes of the Fang clan? It's not worth mentioning, not worth mentioning." Zhang Yan smiled faintly and made a gesture, ordering the maidservant to bring fruits and vegetables and wine. He then asked directly, "Fellow Taoist revealed your identity today and wanted to meet I. What can I do for you?" Kai Dian picked up the wine on the table and took a sip. He squinted his eyes and said, "Nothing much. I saw that the female demon cultivator in the cave abode is very compatible with my cultivation method. I wonder if you can give her to me. Of course, I won't let you suffer any losses." He directly stated the purpose of his visit without any concealment. Just by looking at the literal meaning of the words, it seemed to be a provocation at first glance, but he said it openly, which made it hard for others to feel bad about it. Zhang Yan flicked his sleeves and flatly refused, "Don't mention it again." Not to mention that Lu Mainyang was the wife of North Star faction's elder Yan, even if she was a disciple of his own residence, there was no reason for him to give her away to the demon sect for some benefits. Kai Dian saw that Zhang Yan's attitude was firm and knew that there was no room for discussion. Although he felt that it was a pity, he tactfully did not mention the matter again. He finished the wine in his cup and said, "Since this matter is not going to work out, then please let me go and let this old man's body go. How about it?" Zhang Yan's face was indifferent and he did not say anything. Kai Dian glanced at Zhang Yan's face and said with a smile, "To be honest, fellow Taoist Zhang, this old man is now a wisp of my demonic will. Even if I destroy this body, I won't be able to hurt my body at all. However, if you can open the array door and let me go, I can tell you many secrets that will be useful to you. If you don't want to hear it, then forget it. Although this body has taken a lot of effort from me and it's a pity to destroy it, it's not to the point where I can't bear to part with it." Zhang Yan heard his words and suddenly understood. No wonder this old demon was so fearless. Kai Dian saw that Zhang Yan was still unwilling to express his attitude. He looked around and sighed, "It's a pity, a pity." Zhang Yan secretly sneered. How could he not see that the other party was doing this on purpose? However, he still said, "What's the pity?" Kai Dian seemed to be very regretful and said, "Fellow Taoist is one of the top 10 disciples of the Qinsang school. I think you want to have a place in the sword competition of the 16 sects tomorrow. Please forgive me for being straightforward. This competition is a great opportunity for everyone, no matter if it's the Devil Path or the Xian sect, it's a great opportunity that cannot be missed. However, those who can go to this competition must be in the Yuanying realm. I see that you have not reached the third stage of the core transformation realm. If you can enter this realm in 64 years, just now, you can make a difference. If not, I'm afraid you'll miss this rare opportunity. Zhang Yan heard what he said and felt that he was not lying. He couldn't help but become serious and said, as far as I know, the date of the sword competition of the 16 sects needs to be discussed by the heads of the sections. It hasn't been decided yet. Fellow Taoist, why did you say 64 years? Kai Dian laughed and patted the table. He said, I'm not talking nonsense, but the details. At this point, he stopped talking meaningfully. Zhang Yan knew that this person deliberately revealed some information so that he could judge the value of it. If he didn't agree to leave, he was afraid that he would never tell him about it again. He pondered for a while and felt that since Na Kuan-he's spirit had been destroyed and this devil's body was not here, it was useless to destroy his body. It was better to listen to him explain the whole story. After making up his mind, he said coldly, fellow Taoist is from the devil sect, it's really not convenient to stay here for long. Please leave on your own later. Kai Dian stood up and bowed. He said, thank you, fellow Taoist Zhang. He grabbed a jade plate from the table, then slapped a black gas into it and threw it to Zhang Yan. He said, fellow Taoist will understand when you see it. Chapter 4:15. Zhang Yan took the jade plate and saw that there were dozens of lines of words on it. After reading it, just now, he knew why Kai Dian dared to make such a conclusion. He couldn't help but fall into deep thought. If this really happened, regardless of whether it was the demonic path or the Xian men, they could only take advantage of the situation. Moreover, what such a person said did indeed contain great opportunities, but it was also accompanied by all kinds of dangers. Although the truth of this matter still needed to be discussed, based on his intuition, he felt that it was most likely true. Kai Dian saw that he was thinking there and didn't say anything, so he said loudly, fellow Taoist, don't worry. I am an elder of a sect after all. There is no need to lie to you about such a matter. Even if I don't say it, I believe that the masters of your sect will find out soon. Zhang Yan smiled and said casually, as you said, even if you don't say it, the elders of my sect will find out sooner or later. What is the value of your words today? Kai Dian laughed loudly instead and said, otherwise, with fellow Taoists' wisdom, how could you not know that if you knew about this a step earlier, then you would be able to take the initiative? I don't have to explain the benefits involved, right? Zhang Yan smiled and looked out of the hall, saying, it's already morning. Just now, both sides didn't swear, it was all based on trust. Kai Dian saw that after he told the truth, Zhang Yan really didn't have any intention of stopping him, so he immediately felt relieved. He cupped his hands and said, 64 years will pass in the blink of an eye. Fellow Taoist, be careful. I will take my leave now. Zhang Yan also returned the greeting and said indifferently, I won't see you out. Kai Dian strode out of the mansion. After going outside, he identified the direction, raised a gust of wind, and flew away. After this person left, Zhang Yan sat down and thought carefully. In the past, this was only a competition between the Xian men, and the disciples of the devil's sect were only at the bottom. But this time was different. Once the devil tribulation arrived, it would be a battle between the two major forces of the Xian men and the devil sect. It was a battle of life and death. Now, the devil sect actually knew about this first. Could it be that the cultivation of the experts of the devil sect had already surpassed that of the celestial sect? Thinking of this, his heart skipped a beat. It was not necessarily true that the few true masters in the sect did not know about this news. Perhaps they had already known about it, but for some reason, they did not know about it. Perhaps it was out of consideration for the big picture, or perhaps it was out of selfish thoughts. Therefore, he temporarily buried it in his heart, unwilling to say it out loud. If that was the case, it would be a great fortune for him to know this news in advance. He secretly calculated that it would be extremely difficult to step into the Yuanying realm within 64 years. Currently, he was still lacking in the 5 elements cultivation techniques, and he had yet to finish deducing 3 of them. Even if he succeeded, he still had to pass the last stage, Yin sleep concealment. This stage was the one that took the longest time. He had originally planned to use 100 years to slowly refine it, but now it seemed that he wouldn't be able to. He had to make it in time for the competition. Of course, he had to use some extreme methods to get through. Within the Langya heavenly abode, a strange fragrance wafted in waves, thin mist curled up in spirals, the gurgling stream flowed endlessly, and the courtyard was filled with the clear shadows of the lotus flowers. The air was fragrant and fragrant. Zhong Muqing wore a plain white robe and stood on the square with his hands behind his back. He looked at the hundreds of female cultivators outside the main hall, all of whom were dressed in light robes. He smiled and said, "Senior sister Yu, there are more and more disciples in this cave abode." Standing next to him was a Taoist nun with a smooth forehead and a narrow nose bridge. She looked at the disciples in the hall and felt gratified. She said sincerely, "Thanks to perfected master, our Langya heavenly abode is blessed with good fortune, and we can enjoy it for tens of thousands of years." Zhong Muqing smiled and said, "Perfected master has been in seclusion for 100 days, and he should be coming out soon." Senior sister Yu nodded slightly. After waiting for about half a day, the two of them suddenly heard a rumbling sound, as if stones were rolling down the path. Then, there was a loud chime, and the heavy stone door on the opposite side suddenly opened. Senior sister Yu gripped the horsetail whisk in her hand tightly, and her face was filled with joy. She said, "Perfected master is coming out of seclusion." Suddenly, there was the sound of water splashing, and a strange fragrance wafted over. The disciples only felt a gentle breeze, and the lotus petals in the pond in front of them bloomed. A light mist floated past, and perfected Master Qin, who was wearing a bright moon-purple Taoist robe, sat down on the jade lotus with her phoenix eyes filled with power. The hundreds of disciples below her all knelt down and said, "Disciples greet perfected master." Perfected Master Qin's phoenix eyes swept across, and she held up the aquamarine biaorui in her hand. She pointed at a few people and said, "The few of you, come forward." Every 8 years, she had to choose a few disciples to teach her techniques, and from then on, they would be her real disciples. The few female cultivators who were pointed out were happy, but they couldn't help but feel nervous. They carefully walked forward and knelt in front of her. Perfected Master Qin flicked her jade finger, and a few sparkling jade flowers flew out and entered the space between her eyebrows. After a while, she nodded slightly and said, "The few of you, come and listen to my lecture another day." The few female disciples were overjoyed, and they hurriedly knelt down and kowtowed. Perfected Master Qin sighed in her heart. She looked at these few female disciples, and their aptitudes could be considered passable, but their temperament was inevitably a little lacking. Although she also had the heart to cultivate and become an immortal, the power of heaven was unpredictable, and it was difficult to seek the great Tao. Since the establishment of the Qinsang school, there were only a few people who could fly to other realms, and it could be seen how difficult it was. If they died at the end of their lifespan, they could only reincarnate and cultivate again. As such, it was necessary to train the disciples well, and after the other generation's cultivation was successful, they could reincarnate and enter the Tao sect again. She originally had 12 direct disciples, and 5 of them had entered the Yuanying realm, but 3 of them had already died of old age. Although there were still 2, they didn't have long to live. As for the female disciples in the hall, they were all grand disciples. Although many of them had already condensed their cores, there were only 2 or 3 of them who had condensed their cores, and most of them only had 100 or 200 years left in their lifespan, so they couldn't inherit her supernatural powers at all. Among the lowest generation, there were actually a few good disciples, but their cultivation base was still shallow, and the devil's calamity was right in front of them, so it was hard to say how many of them could survive. She couldn't help but think of Zhou Chengju. Although he only took in one disciple, Zhang Yan, it was better than the hundreds of people in front of her. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but feel a little dispirited, so she waved her hand and said, "All of you can leave, Muqing, you stay." The disciples didn't dare to disobey, and after bowing, they all left. Senior sister Yu couldn't help but feel bitter in her mouth. She had cultivated hard for dozens of years, and felt that her cultivation had greatly improved. Today, she excitedly came to pay her respects to Perfected Master Qin, hoping to say a few words and get a few words of encouragement, but Perfected Master Qin didn't even look at her, and instead left Zhong Muqing alone. In addition to being disappointed, she couldn't help but feel a trace of jealousy in her heart. After coldly looking at Zhong Muqing a few times, she snorted, lowered her head, and left. With Zhong Muqing's cultivation base, he naturally heard it clearly, and also understood why this Taoist nun was dissatisfied with him, but as one of the top 10 disciples, why would he care about this Taoist nun? After everyone left, he tidied up his sleeves, walked forward, and bowed. "Disciple greets Perfected Master." Perfected Master Qin said to him, "A few days ago, when I was meditating, I suddenly felt something, and felt that something big was coming, and in my meditation, I discovered that from today onwards, from that 64 years later, there will be something that involves the fate of our celestial sect." It seemed that this matter was extremely important. Her voice became softer and softer, and even with Zhong Muqing's composure, his expression changed several times, and his mind was agitated. But after listening, he let out a long breath, and said, "According to what Perfected Master said, the decision of the ownership of this item should be on the sword competition of the 16 sects." Perfected Master Qin nodded approvingly, and said, "That's right, but this time, we need to go above the extreme astral wind, and that has to be the Yuanying realm." Zhong Muqing bowed deeply, and said, "Disciple understands Perfected Master's intention. Now that my cultivation is gradually reaching perfection, in at most 30 to 40 years, I will definitely be able to achieve Yuanying." Perfected Master Qin glanced at him, and sighed, "Muqing, I am extremely at ease with you. You and Qi Yuntian are close in age. If I didn't ask you to be my disciple back then, and delayed your cultivation a lot, I'm afraid you would have already achieved Yuanying." Zhong Muqing hurriedly knelt down, and said loudly, "Perfected Master's great kindness, and the 100 years of meticulous nurturing, disciple will never forget it. Even if 100 generations, I will not be able to repay it. How can I dare to have any resentment?" Perfected Master Qin smiled lightly, and raised her white wrist, and said, "You can stand up." Zhong Muqing didn't dare to disobey, and stood up. Perfected Master Qin said to him gently, "If you can return from that place this time and take that item back, in the future, the position of Duzhen Hall Master will definitely be yours." Although she said it casually, after Zhong Muqing heard it, he couldn't help but feel a sense of joy in his heart. Of the 3 Hall Masters, only the upper extreme Hall Master's position had been confirmed, and in the future, it would definitely be Qi Yuntian's. As for the Daylight Hall Master's position, it seemed that Hu Xian had the highest chance to take over. However, Miss Chen seemed to be dissatisfied with him, and he was only a son-in-law, so she might not completely trust him. It was hard to say what would happen in the future. But if nothing unexpected happened, it would definitely be obtained by the aristocratic families. As for the position of Duzhen Hall Master, Perfected Master Qin favored Zhong Muqing. In her opinion, whether it was cultivation, lifespan, or seniority, this child was the most suitable. As long as she had this position, even if sect head's senior brother used Perfected Master Peng to keep her in check, she would still be in an invincible position. Therefore, this matter must not be taken lightly. Perfected Master Qin glanced over and saw the joy on Zhong Muqing's face, but she didn't blame him. She only reminded him, "Don't be careless. This time, it's not like you don't have opponents. Zhuang Bufan, Luo Qingyu, and Ning Chongxian are all outstanding people. There's also that Zhang Yan. I guess he will definitely compete with you, so you have to be extra careful." Zhong Muqing was puzzled and said, "Perfected Master, junior brothers Zhuang, Luo, and Ning are fine, but that Zhang Yan is only now second stage of core transformation. How is it possible for him to step into the Yuanying stage in 60 years? Perfected Master Qin said lightly, if sect head's senior brother helps, it won't be difficult. Zhong Muqing was shocked and said, Perfected Master, are you saying that sect head's senior brother intends to support that Zhang Yan to replace the disciple? Perfected Master Qin's expression was slightly cold as she said, sect head's senior brother's cultivation deepens, and his thoughts become more and more difficult to guess. It's fine if he stays out of this matter, but if he insists on making things difficult for me, then I won't sit still and wait for death. At that time, I can only ask Uncle Master to come forward and uphold justice. Zhong Muqing was shocked at first when he heard this, then he was delighted. If he could ask this Grand Supreme Elder to come forward, then it would really be foolproof. Chapter 4:16. Inside Zhang Yan's main residence, the room was filled with jade green. Hundreds and thousands of rays of light shone from Zhang Yan's body. Halos appeared and flickered in the residence, turning into thousands of strands, as if the cave walls were painted with a layer of jade green. Zhang Yan opened his eyes and carefully sized up the misty bluish-green splendor. He saw that there seemed to be an infinite amount of life force hidden within it. It was about to move, but he couldn't restrain it no matter what, so he withdrew the spell and no longer suppressed it. The jade-green light was suddenly unrestrained and expanded outwards, giving out a deafening sound. The four walls and the ground shook, as if it wanted to push open the cave. The mirror spirit was so shocked that it immediately came out and operated the formation to stabilize the place. Zhang Yan's expression was filled with joy. He practiced the true light for a long while, just now he started to retract it. In just a short while, he had absorbed it into his body. This joy only lasted for a moment. He pinched his fingers together and calculated, and then his expression turned serious. Another 7 years had passed in the blink of an eye. Although it was faster than he had expected, and his wood elemental true light had achieved initial success, there were only 57 years left before the sword duel, and time was getting more and more pressing. The next step would be to use the 9 true scriptures to deduce the cultivation method. Based on the current situation, with the help of the broken jade, he would at most use 1.5 years to be able to deduce the wood element true light technique. It was just that he still didn't have the whereabouts of the metal and fire qi. Before Lu Yenny left, he had specially instructed to find these 2 qi. With his understanding of his eldest disciple, as long as he entrusted this matter to him, he would definitely do his best to complete it. Calculating the time, he was about to return. He couldn't rush it. If everything went smoothly, then the remaining 2 true light, after his eldest disciple returned, he would be able to cultivate it in about 20 years. With that, the 5 elements would merge into one and he would be able to complete it. After that, he would have to find a way to condense the true seal and step into the 3rd realm of core transformation. What was left for him was about 30+ years. The stage of hibernating Yin and using hidden qi needed to swallow a huge amount of heaven and earth qi. There was no shortcut to speak of. Even with the help of the broken jade, it wouldn't be of much use. Duda, Xiaochua, Zhuangbu Fan, Luo Qingyu and the others, which one of them had not entered this realm long ago? However, they all stopped at this stage, which showed how difficult it was. This wasn't because they weren't diligent, but because the higher the grade of the pill, the more time it would take. Zhang Yan thought to himself that his Dan had reached the 1st grade. It would only take longer. To break into the Yuanying state in such a short period of time was almost as difficult as ascending to the heavens. He pondered for a long time and suddenly thought of something. Why did he have to think about such a difficult problem alone? There was no harm in asking the sect leader for advice. Let's see if there's a way. With this thought in mind, he left the residence and headed to the floating sky palace. With the help of the talisman, he soon arrived at the side hall that he had been to before. After reporting his name, the boy recognized him and immediately went in to report. After a short while, he walked out and said that the sect master had summoned him. Inside the hall, Zhang Yan went forward and bowed. "Greetings, sect leader." Sect leader Qin's warm voice came from the high platform. "Zhang Yan, why aren't you cultivating in the cave? Why are you here?" Zhang Yan answered, "I have some doubts, so I came to ask for your guidance." Sect leader Qin said, "Speak." Zhang Yan didn't hide anything and told him about Kai Dian. He just left out many details. In the end, he said, "I don't know if this is true or not." When the sect leader heard this, he said with a smile, "You already know that this is true, so why ask me? It's just that it's not the right time yet, so it's not convenient for me to tell the disciples. Don't spread it around." Zhang Yan bowed and said, "I want to go to the sword competition conference, but I have some difficulties. I hope sect leader can guide me." Sect leader Qin looked at him and held his horsetail whisk, as if thinking about something. Sect leader Qin looked at him and pinched his horsetail whisk, as if he was thinking about something. After a while, he seemed to have made up his mind and said in a clear voice, "Since you already know about this, it is also your fate. This is the will of the heavens. I will show you a path. If you can condense your spiritual power and true seal within 20 years, you can come to the floating heavenly palace to cultivate. Remember, I will only give you 30 years. Whether you can succeed or not will depend on your own luck." When he finished, he waved his horsetail whisk and dismissed him. When Zhang Yan heard this, he couldn't help but feel happy. The floating heavenly palace was one of the top 10 spiritual eyes in the Donghua continent. Only the third lord and grand elder could cultivate here just now. The spiritual qi in it was endless and not something a normal cave could compare to. If he could cultivate here, entering the Yuanying realm within 30 years would not be an extravagant hope. He bowed again and said, "I'll take my leave." After saying goodbye to sect leader Qin, he left the heavenly palace and returned to his residence to cultivate. A month later, the dim light turned into a famous cave. Inside the cave, there was smoke from the furnace and candles in the hall. Jinren Yen was meditating and cultivating. Suddenly, he heard a boy report, "Master, Jinren Zhu is here." Jinren Yen opened his eyes and said, "Let him in." After a while, Jinren Zhu entered the hall. After bowing, he sat on the cattail hassock in front of Jinren Yen. Jinren Yen said, "Junior brother, why did you come to my place today?" Priest Zhu waved his sleeves and said angrily, "Senior brother, why do you ask when you already know the answer?" Jinren Yen chuckled and said, "Is it because the sect leader master allowed Zhang Yan to borrow the floating heavenly palace?" Jinren Zhu said with dissatisfaction, "Since Zhang Yan can use it, why can't my disciples? That thing comes from the sky, and everyone has a chance. Why does master only favor Zhang Yan?" Jinren Yen shook his head and said, "The sect leader master's arrangement must have a deep meaning, but you and I don't understand it. Instead of complaining here, junior brother, you'd better go back and train your disciples. If they can pass the test by luck, they will have a chance. Why do you envy others?" Jinren Zhu was a little surprised and didn't understand why Jinren Yen didn't care about this matter, which was very different from usual. So, he asked tentatively, "Senior brother, don't you want to fight for it?" Jinren Yen closed his eyes and said, "You and I are disciples. How can we argue with master?" Jinren Zhu frowned and looked at his senior brother. According to his understanding of this senior brother, how could he have no complaints about this matter? But he couldn't see anything from the surface. After a pause, he persuaded again, "Senior brother, why are you so stubborn? It's natural to follow the sect leader's order. However, master didn't say anything to us. If we should fight, we should fight. Why do we have so many scruples?" Jinren Yen was silent for a moment and suddenly sighed. He said, "It's not that I don't want to fight, but it's useless to fight. You need to know that Bufan, Qingyu, and Chongxian are all my disciples. But Zhang Yan isn't one of us. If he has a chance to climb to the top of the Duzhen Hall, Jinren Chen and the other three won't stop him. The masters and disciples of the three halls and the aristocratic families each had one lord. However, no one wanted to let the other get the lord of the Duzhan Hall, lest one party's power increase greatly and completely overwhelm the other party. But now, it seemed that Zhang Yan was the most suitable. Originally, because he wasn't a disciple of the heavenly abode, his foundation was shallow and it was difficult for him to stand firm. This was his weakness, but now it seemed that it had become his advantage. From the perspective of the aristocratic families, the position of the Duzhan Hall's lord was an acceptable result for Zhang Yan since they didn't have a choice. Once he took the position, it would be the same as Jinren Qin belonging to two parties. In the future, the three parties could coexist in peace. Sect leader Qin intentionally released the news that he wanted to help Zhang Yan. It might be because he wanted to test the aristocratic families. If their reaction wasn't intense and they could return from the sword competition of the 16 sects in the future, it was very likely that they would push the boat with the current and help this matter. Of course, the premise was that Zhang Yan could achieve Yuanying within 57 years. Otherwise, everything would be empty talk. Jinren Zhu said, "Senior brother knows this, but does junior brother not know?" Jinren Yan couldn't help but open his eyes. He looked at Jinren Zhu and said, "Junior brother, do you mean that you have a wonderful plan?" Jinren Zhu seemed to have a card up his sleeve. He said, "If not, how could I come to find you?" Jinren Yan suddenly became a little interested and said, "Junior brother, you might as well tell me." Jinren Zhu turned his body sideways and stretched out his finger. He pointed outside and said meaningfully, "Jinren Qin came to find me for this matter the day before yesterday." Jinren Yan's eyes gradually brightened. He stroked his beard and said, "If so, I have an excuse to make a move." Jinren Zhu said loudly, "Senior brother, thanks to Jinren Qin's help in the past, the change in the sect didn't affect us. Now that she has put down her pride and came to ask for help, how can we not agree? Even if sect leader master knows, he can't blame us." Jinren Yan nodded and said, "I understand. I will make arrangements in a few days. Junior brother, go in peace." Jinren Zhu had obtained Jinren Yan's promise, so he had achieved his goal. After bowing to Jinren Yan, he left in satisfaction. Jinren Yan sat on the praying mat and thought for a long time. He calculated with his fingers and then said to the boy beside him, "Go and call your senior brother here." Not long after, a young Taoist with broad shoulders and a thin waist walked over. He bowed in front of Jinren Yan and said, "Xiao Ao greets master." Jinren Yan looked at him carefully and saw that he had already reached the Xian light realm. He said with relief, "Your progress is not bad, but you must not be arrogant and impatient. Remember not to repeat the mistakes of your predecessor." Xiao Ao said solemnly, "Yes, I will remember." Jinren Yan said, "I made an agreement with Jinren Xiao in the past so that you could reincarnate into the Xiao clan. Today, the time has come. You can go back to the clan." Xiao Ao bowed and said respectfully, "I will never forget the kindness of giving me a new life. I will not forget what master has entrusted to me." Back then, Fang Zhen's remnant soul escaped from the devil's cave, and Jinren Yan found Jinren Xiao. After a secret discussion, Jinren Yan paid a huge price to send Fang Zhen to be reincarnated in the Xiao clan. Then, Jinren Yan found countless spirit medicines and precious pills for Fang Zhen and used a magic treasure to help Fang Zhen consolidate his foundation. Jinren Yan personally taught Fang Zhen for almost 40 years, and just now, he had achieved what he had now. Jinren Yan reminded him, "If Jinren Xiao has any orders, listen carefully and don't disobey them. I won't help you. Go." Xiao Ao bowed to Jinren Yan and left to accept the order. Jinren Yan smiled proudly. The situation of the chess game should not only look at the present, but also look at the future. If he only followed others' chess moves and dealt with them passively, he would always be at a disadvantage. A temporary victory was nothing. Now that he had made his move, the result would be clear when the time came. Chapter 4:17. Zhang Yan held the broken jade in his hand, and his mind sank into it as he tried to deduce it. 3 great Daos appeared in his sea of consciousness. They were the correct path to the wood elemental true light cultivation technique that he had painstakingly deduced. At this moment, his body suddenly shook, and one of the great Daos collapsed, leaving only the last 2. As long as he cut off one more path, he would be able to completely deduce this cultivation technique. Just as he was about to continue deducing, he suddenly felt a surge of inspiration. He seemed to have sensed something, and he immediately retracted his mind and came out of the broken jade. He waved the small pot mirror, and the surface of the mirror rippled like water. Only then did he know what had happened. He smiled and said, "So fellow Taoist Luo has also reached this realm after forming the core from medicinal transformation." At this moment, in the hall, Luo Zhao's expression was overjoyed. Her cheeks were flushed red as if she'd drunk fine wine, and her charming dimples were intoxicated like a blooming flower. Even though she didn't put on any makeup, her entire body glowed with a bright and beautiful color. Seeing her like this, Zhang Yan knew that she was just now condensing her core, and the vitality around her was extremely vigorous. It was just like how when he first condensed his core back then, he wanted to soar into the sky and travel tens of thousands of miles. It was the same logic. It wasn't just because he was happy, it was also because of his vigorous qi and blood. Cultivators only needed to circulate their golden core and slowly restrain it, and they would be able to look normal in a few days. Zhang Yan got up and opened the array door. He stepped into the main hall and laughed. "Fellow Taoist Luo has reached the golden core formation, and your lifespan has reached 600 years. Congratulations, I should give you a congratulatory gift." Luo Xiao was still immersed in the joy of breaking through. Seeing Zhang Yan come out to congratulate her, she happily returned the greeting. "I don't deserve your congratulations. Didn't I rely on your help to achieve what I have today?" After a cultivator entered the golden core formation, their lifespan was around 600 years, but this varied from person to person. Some had a longer lifespan while others had a shorter lifespan. Mystic Light Realm cultivators only had 300 years of lifespan, and Luo Xiao had cultivated for 200 years before she met Zhang Yan. She knew that she did not have much time left to live. Although she did not show it on the surface, she was anxious and depressed on the inside. Now that her cultivation was complete and she could finally enter the core transformation stage, how could she not be happy? Zhang Yan smiled and said, "It's not a big gift, please don't mind." With a flick of his sleeve, 12 magical swords flew out of his sleeve along with the smoke. Their heads and tails joined together, forming a circle in the air. For a moment, the sword chi was dense, the cold light piercing one's skin. These 12 magical swords were obtained by Zhang Yan from Xiao Mu's sleeve, and they were forged in the Qinsang School's Baoyang courtyard. Although it could not be considered a magic treasure, it was still incomparably sharp. Ordinary magic treasures could not compare to it. Luo Xiao immediately revealed a happy expression when she saw the treasured qi of the 12 magic swords circulating and emitting rays of cold light. She stretched out her hand. The magic swords were all moved and fell down. With another wave of her hand, they all let out a clear hum and fell into her hand. When Zhang Yan first obtained this magic sword, he had never tried it out. He did not think that it would have such a change. After being startled for a moment, he smiled and said, "Fellow Luo, it seems that this item is really fated with you. It should be yours." The magic power on this magic sword had long been erased by Zhang Yan, so Luo Xiao could use it freely with just a little bit of refinement. She held it in her hand and practiced, controlling it to fly around. Seeing that this magic sword could split and combine according to her will, she couldn't help but reveal a hint of joy on her face. She said, "Master, I will shamelessly accept this gift." At this moment, a few of Zhang Yan's disciples also heard the commotion and came out of the cultivation cave. In the main hall, the Wang sisters' eyes were filled with envy. They came up to congratulate her and said, "Lady Luo, congratulations." Jiang Zhen also smiled and went up to congratulate her. However, Tian Kun was not good with words, so he just cupped his hands to express his congratulations. Luo Xiao knew his personality, so she did not mind. Shang Chang and Luo Xiao were the first to know each other, and they were both Yao cultivators. Within the cave, their relationship could be considered the best. She was also sincerely happy for Luo Xiao. After everyone had congratulated her, she then came over and said, "Sister, sister congratulates you." When Luo Xiao saw her, her eyes turned and she grabbed Shang Chang's wrist. She led her to the front of Zhang Yan and said, "Master, Sister Shang has a weak personality and has never had any desires. It's just that she has been managing the cave for you all these years. Even if she doesn't have any merits, she has put in a lot of effort. Today, I will ask for a favor for her. Master, please grant her a good cultivation technique so that she can achieve Dao soon." After Shang Chang transformed, she had been cultivating with no other superior cultivation techniques. Seeing that others in the cave could cultivate and seek Dao, it would be a lie to say that she was not envious. However, she knew that she was born a demoness, so she did not have too many expectations. Now that Luo Xiao suddenly asked for a favor, she did not know what to do. Flustered and confused, she said, "Master, this, sister, you." Zhang Yan took a look at her and nodded, "Lady Shang indeed has it hard. Fellow Taoist Luo, I have taught you hundreds of cultivation techniques. Choose one and teach it to her." Luo Xiao giggled and pushed Shang Chang. She said, "Sister, aren't you going to thank Master?" Shang Chang was overjoyed. Holding back her tears, she knelt down and said, "This servant thanks Master." Zhang Yan smiled and nodded. He said, "No need to thank me. You should thank fellow Taoist Luo. Go and prepare a banquet, we need to celebrate with her today." Shang Chang stood up and took out a handkerchief to wipe away her tears. She said, "I'm sorry, Master. This servant will go and prepare it now." Just as she was about to move, at this moment, she suddenly heard a long whistle from the northeast corner of the hall. It sounded like the cry of a wild goose or the cry of a phoenix. Immediately after, a loud trembling sound came. The spiritual energy in the cave was instantly stirred up, and everyone felt a strange feeling in their hearts. Luo Xiao was deep in thought. She raised her head and looked at Zhang Yan. She said in surprise, "Could this be?" Zhang Yan waved his sleeve and smiled, "It should be. We will know in a while." Seeing that the two of them were talking in riddles, everyone was a little confused. However, there were also those who were intelligent and familiar with the situation in the mansion, such as the Wang sisters. With a quick turn of their minds, they were able to guess the whole story. At this moment, an auspicious aura gushed into the hall. Everyone looked towards the entrance, only to see a lady dressed in white with long hair draped over her shoulders walking in. She was like a pure white lotus, her aura was clear and peaceful, returning to one's natural state. When she reached the center of the hall, she bowed to Zhang Yan and said, "This humble Taoist greets the Manor Lord." Zhang Yan was not as arrogant as usual. He solemnly returned the greeting and said, "Enlightened Master Lu, no need to be so polite." This woman was Lu Mainyang. She had already crossed the door and achieved the Yuanying realm that many demon cultivators could not reach. She herself was extremely depressed as well. Even though stepping into the nascent soul realm in one go was something worthy of rejoicing, her lifespan was close to 600 years, and it was extremely unlikely for her to step foot into the avatar realm in her lifetime. Zhang Yan laughed brightly and said, "I didn't think that even fellow Taoist Lu would come out this time. We should congratulate you. If there was a Yuanying enlightened master in the clear nether heavenly lake, it would be very different from the past. From now on, he would not have to worry about enemies coming to find him. In the future, if he wanted to travel far away, he could go with peace of mind." After receiving Zhang Yan's order, Shang Chang immediately went to make arrangements. She ordered all the maids in the mansion to work and set up a banquet. In just a moment, the maids were like butterflies flying through flowers. They walked around the hall and kept serving delicacies. In this clear nether heavenly lake, there were strange fish and beasts, precious fruits and delicacies. Usually, there were not many guests. There were many cultivators in the mansion, so they rarely took them out to make food. Today, taking advantage of this opportunity, they brought them all out and filled the table in front of the hall. Wang Kading was born in a big family and loved crowds. At this moment, she muttered, "There's wine but no songs. Boring, boring." Luo Zhao's ears were sharp. When she heard her voice, she turned her head and looked at her. She smiled sweetly and said, "Little Miss Wang is right. Sister Shang's clansmen are good at singing and dancing. It's just that they need to borrow the water to dance." Yuji beauties were famous for their singing and dancing. Especially their dance moves, they were top-notch. However, because it was a dance in the water, people rarely saw it. Lu Mainyang smiled lightly and said, "What's so difficult about it? Let's see how I do it." She raised her hand and pinched her fingers. She sucked a breath over. She muttered something and pointed downwards. The sound of water was heard. A clear spring was drawn from the basin and water jar placed in the corner of the hall. It landed on the ground. Water vapor came from all directions and gradually gathered. In the end, it turned into a pool. It was 1,000 feet wide, enough for dozens of Yuji to dance in it. Zhang Yan had never seen the dance of Yuji. When he was about to take a closer look, the mirror spirit came out of nowhere and whispered in his ear, "Master, that Xiao Yi wants to see you. He said he has something important to tell you." Zhang Yan's expression didn't change. Using the opportunity of drinking, he said, "Bring him to the back hall and wait. I'll see him later." During the competition that day, Zhang Yan promised Xiao Yi to return Xiao He from the clan. However, this person had already taken over Xiao Yi's body and left. This was a spy that Zhang Yan had conveniently planted that day. He didn't take it to heart. However, this person was bold and ruthless. He also had some intelligence. He wouldn't come here for no reason. Thus, he decided to see him. Xiao Yi was led to the back hall to wait. He didn't show any impatience. He waited calmly for an hour. Just now, when he saw Zhang Yan strolling in, he immediately stood up and bowed deeply. He said respectfully, "Greetings, Chief." Zhang Yan reached out and pressed down on him. He sat down on the main seat and said in a deep voice, "You must have a reason for coming to find me. Is there something important?" Xiao Yi paused and said in a low voice, "It's not anything important. It's just that there's someone who is very suspicious. He might be harmful to Chief. I had some free time to leave the clan today. This is a rare opportunity, so I came to report to Chief." When he said this, he looked up and saw that Zhang Yan was listening. He continued, "Half a year ago, a new clansman came to my Xiao clan. His name is Xiao Ao. He's also in the mystic light realm. Although he claims to be a member of my Xiao clan and has been cultivating for more than 30 years, the strange thing is that I've never heard of him before." He laughed self-mockingly and said, "Ha, I'm not afraid of Chief laughing at me. I have a problem with being overly suspicious. Thus, I sent my trusted subordinates to investigate. However, they didn't find anything. I don't know who he has been cultivating with all these years. If he was a normal disciple, why would he need to be so secretive? Thus, I boldly guess that there must be something wrong with this person's background." You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.